going there. There we go. All right, let's try this again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. All right, security should be baked in, not sprayed on. Remember, guys, security is not an afterthought. It is integrated into the design right from the beginning. So if you get a feasibility study, as you will when they question you on software, you consider security right here. You'll do an initial risk assessment right there. When we understood requirements, when we interview people, we understand, they tell us again the features, and we have to consider assurance, and we'll decide. Okay, we have to make sure that if they said that they want to take credit cards, we know that they have to be encrypted. And then we architected solution. So before they said we were going to encrypt, now we're going to say we're going to use AES over SSL, blah, 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 128 bits. And when we design that, our architectures create or contain checklists. Very important to understand checklists. They are very likely to ask you that. The checklists contain the specs, the specifications. So I said it must be AES at 128 bits. That's the spec. I specified that. So when developers develop, they should develop according to design. And that's what verification is. You tell people what to do, and then they develop according to design, and you didn't tell them everything. And they got to think on their feet. And developers have very limited time. They gave them a schedule. Back on the project initiation, they were given a schedule and a budget. When you go through these life cycles, a couple of ways to go through a life cycle. I could try in project initiation, make sure I got all the budget and knowing everything I need. You say, this is how much money we're going to spend. This is when it's got to get done. Problem is when I do functional requirements and I start identifying more requirements, I might realize we got to go back and ask for more money. Now, this is going to take longer than we thought. That happens. It's bound to happen. If I start going to system design, though, and I start architecting solutions, and that's when I realized I needed more money, no, there's something wrong with our planning. We're not thinking. We're not planning everything properly. So in what's known as the waterfall model, the waterfall model is one of the ways to get through this life cycle. You dot every I and cross every T. You can go back one level, that understood, but you should never go back two. And to make sure that you have everything, we have life cycle checks and balances. We have quality assurance and quality controls. Quality assurance, you create specifications. So at each gate, are we ready to move on to functional requirements? Okay, good. We got all the requirements. We're ready to move on to design. These are gates. There's a keeper at the gate, sometimes they're called in these tests, who decides whether or not you've got everything. You have a gate review. Are we ready to move on? And in the waterfall model, you never go back 2 levels. And this requires a lot of planning. And this is good for things like NASA. NASA has to, because they don't have a chance to, bring the satellite back and let's try it again. They got to get it right. That's not how I develop music. I know some music guys develop like that. I have 2 friends of mine that are extremely skilled and learned in music, and they score all their music. They hand the sheets to the other musicians that they hire and go, this is what you will play. They architected everything. I don't do that. When I record music, I go through, I'll have a beat in my mind. I'll be like, okay, I get this rhythm or maybe a rhythm guitar or a beat, and I boom, 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 maybe it's a bass, boom, 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 boom. And I initiate it, I get the idea, the requirements, I design, I record it. I record the bass and I tweak it just right. And now I got the bass. Well, I'm probably going to have a sample guitar or drum track to keep the rhythm. So I'll pick just an abbreviated little drum track. I'll go back later. And then as I listen to that, I go, all right, now I got an idea for the guitar. And now I got an idea for the lead vocals. And I do what's called a spiral. I'm not doing a waterfall. And the good thing about my spiral is by the time I get down to installation and implementation testing, there is just no way I'm going to be that far off by the time I get to the end, because I knew on the first guitar, yeah, that's the song I was thinking about. Yeah, that's kind of how it goes. But in a waterfall model, if you didn't done it, remember I said the functional requirements, very difficult? And if somebody asked you to bring a picture of a dog tied to a fence, and you may have gone all the way through, and then in testing you said, here's a picture of a dog I took and I tied it to a fence. No, that's not what I wanted. So with a spiral model, it is easier to develop a prototype. Prototypes help people understand, is this what the customer really wanted? Am I really working on a valid solution to the problem? And remember, validation is that it meets the customer's, the business unit's functional requirements. It does what it needed to do. Now, when we looked at the National Vulnerability Database and the MITRE database, and you see these vulnerabilities that were discovered, I don't think they're doing waterfall to develop the patches. They're probably not even doing spiral. They started years ago with something called extreme programming, where you had people working at all levels at once and they're staring over your shoulder to kick things out. But this is scaled back just a little bit, and I hear these like lean designs, lean development. So that's probably what you're hearing more for, but these are for quick development, quick patches. They're not for big products. So you determine what works best for you. Our objectives understand the development lifecycle. So I said, if you get the heavy app dev test, that's one of the things they beat up a lot, and we should be much more familiar with it than most. We didn't wait till software development. I've been using the SDLC for everything, so hopefully it's ingrained in your heads-up display there. Database concepts and security issues. If you do get the big app dev, I understand it's a lot of databases. And we're talking about this all week. If I take all my clothes out of the dryer and I plop them on the bed, the guest bed, that's not a database. It's a flat file or whatever. And the whole point of databases is putting things away so you can retrieve it later. Well, it's very easy to put things away that way. It's very difficult to retrieve something. Where's that left brown sock? Where's the other sock? So I could take up my clothes and come up with some taxonomy, some categorization or classification scheme. And I say, okay, shirts will go in the shirts drawer. Pants go in the pants drawer. Underwear goes in the underwear drawer. And we have the issue of where do t-shirts go? Is that a shirt? Is that underwear? NIST might tell me it's a shirt, and the ISO tells me it's underwear. And Larry goes with whatever drawer has more free space, because I really don't want to be overtaxed. Taxonomy means to classify, and it's important, but we don't want to be overtaxed. All right, so I put my clothes away in this little hierarchy, and it's St. Patty's Day, and I want to get all my green clothes. I've got to open up 3 drawers. Well, I could have put all my clothes away by color, but that doesn't work for me every day either. So in a relational database, I have that ability to have like a green drawer. And when I open it up, there's all my green clothing, a green shirt, green pants. And then I have a shirt drawer. And I open up the shirts, and there's all my shirts, including that green shirt I just saw. Can't do that in my real physical clothes, because my physical clothes are laid out in a hierarchy. I could have a pants drawer, and then when I open up the pants, I got short, long pants and shorts. But I can't have the shorts show up in the green drawer too. That's because in a hierarchical database, no child object can have more than one parent. Now, I can't have the shirt in 2 drawers, but in a relational database, it can. And that's the way our brains really think. We relate so many things. We're so interrelated. One of my favorite old movies, and I'm a big old movie fan. I'm sorry if I bore you, but my girlfriend can't stand him. If it's not in color, she found I can't get her to watch Casablanca. It puts her to sleep. But she dragged me off to see Dukes of Hazzard. I will never let her live that down. Desk Set with Spencer Tracy and Katharine Hepburn. I didn't even mount my other drive here, so we'll just go. It's so cool. It's from 1956 or 57, and Spencer Tracy is a computer architect. And Desk Set movie. And Katharine Hepburn is a fact finder. She works for a television broadcast company, like the ABC or NBC or something. And the funny thing is, he's there to design a computer system for them. The women in the office that work with her see him, and he's apparently very famous, and they go, "Oh my God, that's that computer genius. He designs those thinking machines. We're going to lose our job." And she's like, "What are you talking about? We're going to get replaced with computers. It happened at this other company. He was there, and then after he was done, they laid off 100 people." And she goes, "Well, they can't replace us with computers." Well, why are you so sure? She says, because we make too many relationships. Well, I don't remember the exact scene. It was something like she's talking to one of the women, and Bob Smith's on the phone from the 6 o'clock evening news. He needs to know who won the 32 World Series, and I don't know really what, but she says, I'm like the Red Sox. How'd you know that? I was wearing Red Sox that day. And anyway, she's talking. Well, he gives her an intelligence test, and there's all this stuff on there. But one of them was like, all right, a train starts off in Poughkeepsie. 13 people get on. Then it stops at Westchester, and 5 people get on, and 6 people get off, and then it goes to whatever Newburgh, and 3 people get on, and 5 people get off, and then when it eventually arrives in Grand Central Station, and she's acting like she's not even paying attention. She's only half paying attention. And he says, when it arrives in Grand Central Station, 42. What'd you say? You were going to ask me how many passengers are. Oh, were you going to include the conductors? Oh, well, then that would make it 45. And he looks at his paper agent. I wasn't going to ask you that. I was going to ask you, and he shuffles back. How many people got on in Newburgh? 3. How many people got off? 5. How did you remember that? There's 3 letters in New and 5 letters in Berg, the way they spell it. He said, do you always relate the number of letters to something? My favorite quote in the movie. Oh, I relate many things to many things. And that's what humans can do that I'll never accept that a computer can do properly. They can make all kinds of neat relationships. That's a goal of our module here. We're going to understand data mining tools to extract data from various data sources. For years, that's how data warehousing works. I understand they may ask you a few questions on data warehousing. Data warehousing is described as taking the data from multiple data sources, putting it into a giant store. You got to normalize the data, make sure everything fits properly in proper fields. But then you can analyze it for patterns that weren't obvious before. Now, I don't know if they're asking about it, but that's not as popular in my experience as something else now. I'm seeing more enterprise search. An enterprise search doesn't require that you move the data. You keep it in the original data stores. You let these other connectors come in, not unlike the way the SIM tools work, right? The SIM tools, they're taking data from the logs and correlating them, creating kind of a data warehouse. But they also kind of reach out and can look at live data. So. They actually have this. It makes me a little nervous, but I don't know the right answer. Enterprise search as a service. That sounds a little risky to me, but hey, I don't know. You hire another vendor to come in from the outside, able to touch all of your data stores and help you find your own stuff. So this is like I hire somebody to come in my house and help me find all the things that I don't put away properly. I don't know. I wouldn't say properly, but whatever. They're good at finding stuff. Guys, here. But the other things with databases that we want to understand is how they were well, if I distribute on a network, I have originally, I think I mentioned this yesterday, I have a computer. Think of the database. There's a computer, a person could sit down. Bob can use it. But when Alice wanted to use it, he'd have to get up and leave his chair, so they distribute it. They put the data itself on disks somewhere, on the network, and then view stations, terminals could go pull that data. This 2-tier design on your test might be called the network model. It's an old thing, but hey, the old guys wrote this stuff. But this became cumbersome because if I move data from one hard drive to another, I have to update every view. So Sun created the 3-tier database design, where I have an intermediate layer, the logical schema, which we think of SQL, to point to the various data stores and connect to all the stores. But then I have views that tie to the schema. And that makes our functionality so much easier. If I have change, I just change the schema and everybody gets it. I set all rights at that schema. That's the middleware. I want you to consider how hard it is to lock all the doors. I got to unmute Marco. because Marco, you were here for a lot of this. Marco, when we were with Scott, I had to build, and I think Marco's probably had to build a few of them too. These data, we used to build SQL servers. I remember the first one I did was for like customer service. People would build these apps in like Power Builder in those days, or Virtual Basic. And then they'd put all security controls. They'd have a username database in this little thing. But they would send a requirements to us to build the SQL server. Now, in our case, it wasn't 3-tier. It was the SQL server and the disks were on the same machine. So, all right, so we kind of took that out. But the first step is to build a SQL server. Hey, what do I make the username and password? They look at it, the lady says, oh, it says to leave it as SA no password. Okay. Now to get the workstations to tie to SQL, Microsoft created and it later became an ISO standard, ODBC, the Open Database Connector. It's a driver that ties the operating system at a kernel level to the back-end database. Well, that makes it very easy to set up an application now because I don't have to, my application just talks, but you have to configure the ODBC. Hey, how do I connect it once a username and password? It says put in SA, no password. Now everyone's operating system is connected to the server as admin without a password. We're going to lock it down inside the app. And so their little front end, their Ring 3 application that you would click on, prompt you for a username and password. But people knew how to go to Excel or something and pull the data up. And it's been my experience, salesmen really know how to use Excel. So this was awful, and we weren't the only ones doing this. A number of viruses spread because they knew people left it as SA no password. It is hard to lock down all those doors. Do you remember building those servers, Marco, when we built a lot of SQL stuff?
Yep, I do.
That's fun stuff. Well, you weren't all that contributing and laughing at that time, so I'm going to mute you again. I thought you might be. All right. Sorry to pick on you. But that was fun, and it was really bad. We weren't the only ones doing it. So just know that it's very difficult to lock down all the access points. And if I do, I might deny somebody access. And how many times have you fixed something this way, guys, in operations? You're trying to do it right. But the worst would be like you're working for legal or something. And so the guy doesn't even ask you. He has a receptionist come up and say, he wants to know how long you're going to be. He needs to get this out. And you're like, you know what? It works for me when I log in as myself. It's got to be a rights issue. Let me just give him admin rights for now, even if it's just to that folder, whatever. And I'll come back and claim. You don't come back and clear it up later. We would also have this show up. In fact, Marco, you found the tool, Slack. It was a tool to see who had a file open in NetWare, because we were supposed to be, building this centralized managed server, but besides that, we found ourselves being an ops and somehow. And people would come in, hey, could you tell me who has this file open? And you find it through Slack. Okay, we go over. The guy's not even there. He's not even logged in. Turn the workstation off. Okay, it just released, and now the database is corrupt. I got to reindex the database. Deadlocks happen all the time. And then if you're going to build like stuff for in those days, we had 56K links. Do you think we wanted people in Europe pulling the data up from Philly? No, so you start replicating data. And if the time servers aren't right, imagine you put money in the bank, and the time server at your bank is off. It's 5 minutes late. So when the synchronization goes on, another server goes, oh, you've got an old record. He doesn't have that money in there. So we've got confidentiality, integrity, and availability problems in our databases. So no wonder if you do get the heavy app dev, you get a lot of database, because it makes sense. This is information security, and that's where we kept our information. A little bit in configuration and change management. Truth is, I took most of this out and put it in operations in the next module. So, but when we think of change management, we always think of change to production. Most people, that's where they're at. Change is going to happen anywhere on the SDLC, of course, but change production is the risky part. All configs have to be documented. They have to be approved. They have to be backed up. You know, the new config might not work in the real world the way it worked in the lab. You better be able to I'd like to be able to back out a change. I can't always back out a change. If I knock out a wall because I'm going to make a room bigger, and then in the realize, oh, dude, that's a load-bearing wall. I can't put the old wall back. I'll put up some post to hold it up for a while. I replaced the electrical distribution panel in my mother's house. If the new one didn't work, I wasn't putting the old one back. I had a orange extension cable to go to a neighbor's to run the refrigerator. So if a back out is not possible, then we have fallbacks. A back out restores you to the previous state. A fallback is a contingency. Artificial intelligence, which I don't believe in, but I believe we will have wonderful failures. Image stabilization on a camera, it to me is failed artificial intelligence, and it's a great product. It doesn't think for itself, but it certainly is awesome. I can't even watch old handheld things until that came out. So artificial intelligence is great. I used to do a lot of optical character recognition. You train the database. This is a letter A. You give it another sample, a different font type. That's a letter A too. And after a while, it understands the rules of a letter A. So when it scans in a new font type, we used to get about 85% accurate in those days. If you're doing different font types, and go, is that an A? Seems to follow the rules of an A. That's an expert system. But a neural network would learn on its own. And this is what I thought the Roomba vacuum cleaner was going to do. I thought the Roomba vacuum cleaner would map out my house and then from then on know it. No, it actually tries to discover each and every time you turn it on. So I sent it back. What I would like it to do is to, it would run for a little bit. It doesn't know anything about my house. It just goes, but then when it bangs into a wall, it should make a note of that. Okay, don't do that again. The problem with rule-based programming, as I see it, is it is very easy to rule out. Don't go there again. The problem is ruling in. Where does the vacuum cleaner go next? And I mentioned one of my favorite cybernetic books is Oh, the Places You'll Go, Dr. Seuss. You'll come to a place where the streets are not marked. Some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. A place you could sprain both your elbow and chin. Do you dare to stay out? Do you dare to go in? And if you go in, do you turn left or right? Or right and 3/4? Or maybe not quite? Or go around back and sneak in from behind? Simple it's not, I'm afraid you'll find, for a mind maker-upper to make up their mind. That, I think, is what I'd never trust a computer to do. They just guess statistically. I need somebody like a Kirk that goes, I have a hunch, Spock. Kirk can pick a direction, Spock can. All right, well, I don't believe in this stuff that it'll ever take over. It doesn't mean it's not testable. And you basically need to know the difference between an expert system and a neural network. Expert systems have to be trained. Neural networks train themselves. And if one other hint, if you see anything that looks like the word neuron, it's neural network, which artificial intelligence system would have units that mimic neurons based on the neural structure of the human brain. Would that be neural network? Yeah. All right, mobile code comes in a lot of different types. So far, I hear they still mostly beat up Java and ActiveX. And don't confuse Java with JavaScript. I find JavaScript much more dangerous. When you see me running no script, that's mostly what I'm protecting myself from. I mean, there's a lot of different scripts, but that's the most popular, I think. With mobile code from Java versus ActiveX, you need to learn their two security schemes. Java will, knowing that this code that you didn't certify to credit, just drive-by download, might be risky. So you're contained in that Ring 3 VM. It's not allowed to leave its hotel room. It can't come down to the pool or do anything else. It's called the sandbox. Nice. Of course, they have written Java applets that escape the sandbox, so not always true. I don't know that they've been that bad, but we do know it's sometimes a false sense of security. But it's slower. It's slow to keep people sandboxed. So Microsoft didn't want to go through that. They made ActiveX, guy, do whatever you want. I'm not going to sandbox you. We're just going to make sure that your PKI validated. You're digitally signed the code. We're not making it encrypted, but the whole point of PKI, right, is to validate where this came from. Just because I know where the code came from doesn't mean it's good code. And besides, we already saw the problems with fake credentials, so I don't even know that I know where it came from. There was a lot of really bad malware written with ActiveX. Other thing, .NET can do both. I don't know if they ask any .NET, but it can do both. It depends on your needs. Shockwave apps. Think about too, it's like even if all these apps were good, I'm borrowing this from Bruce Schneier. You take your Internet Explorer and you download a Shockwave app. You download a JavaScript. You download a Java, and even if all four of these things were good, they're in the same Ring 3 VM now. There is no security kernel component to enforce rules within an application with it. Again, so the hotel security staff will help you get securely to your room and back and all that stuff and get in your room and make sure no one else can get in your room. But when you bring your kids in that room, nobody from the hotel makes sure that those kids play nicely together. So it's tough. There's no right answer. I just want you to consider things. Malware, I told you, no matter what test you get, everybody gets beat up on the malicious code. Now, first time I heard of a virus, it was just, some guys were, it was actually a Land Times article, and these Indian guys had created a virus. And then within months, I think I told you guys, I started seeing the form and stoned. And you try to delete them, and they come back up because they were embedded in the boot sector. And Marco and I know one really nerdy guy, brilliant engineer from IBM, used to use debug to copy people's boot sectors. Ken Zanato. But that was not our, we would just say, no, that thing's dead, man. That thing's dead. So then a guy came out, and where I was working at Wang. This was actually before I met Marco. So I was at Wang Laboratories, and I couldn't fix these things. You had a virus, you had a virus. Guy shows me McAfee antivirus. And he said, make a copy of this diskette. Make sure it's write protected. He said, boot up with this. This would have been 91. He said, and you clean up. And now I'm cleaning up stuff with a boot-like copy of McAfee. Then I come in, emergency meeting, everybody. Look at the cover of the Wall Street Journal. The story was the Michelangelo virus. It's going to infect everybody it's going to delete your hard drive on the anniversary of Michelangelo's birthday. And I went, what? So we get company blessed McAfee disks, and we are to visit every one of our customers and run this. And I never got messed with these. The first virus I got hit with, and Marco was with me, somebody mailed me from IBM a Word document, and it wasn't a document. It was a macro, and it reformatted all of my documents to templates. The word macro virus. On your test, macro viruses are easier to create because of the simplicity of macro languages. And then we talked about once had a virus being spread by PS2 config disk by text. Oh, I remember that thing. I remember that. There was a compact one too. I didn't get infected. There was a compact ProLiant utility or something. Wait, remember you'd install the third-party device drivers on your IBM PS2 disk, so it became a really neat thing. Dude, he's got a great one. He's got device drivers for all kinds of stuff on his. You got me going. My ACID drives. Anyway, piece of drive. We talked about Robert Morris Jr. creating a worm. His worm spread on its own. That's what made it a worm, is the fact that it didn't require user intervention. I told you the difference between malware are mostly its propagation method. The payload of what evil thing it's going to do can be the same. Viruses require user interaction. A worm spreads on its own. And a Trojan is when you're tricked into opening the door for them. And most of our malware throughout the last 10, 15 years has been through Trojan. They trick you. It's a game in Facebook. I told you, if you want to get my birthday, just cut and paste it. And please stop sending me game invites. And now these things talk to each other. The botnets talk to each other. And I mentioned Zeus. Up until Zeus, I thought about botnets as being things to either do a distributed denial of service or to spread spam. But in August of like 2010, I read of Zeus, the botnet, robbed a bank. It was robbing banks. And I was like, ooh, banks don't have to tell you that they get robbed if it's under $1 million. You think about that when we get back to risk management, right? High impact, high likelihood. What do you guys think? High likelihood, low likelihood for Royal Bank of Scotland to get robbed. It's like 1.7 per day. They don't have to tell you that. If not many people want it. Hey, you want to put your money in our bank? We get robbed all the time. Now that's globally, So when they told us, I said, it's got to be over $1 million. Within 3 months, we found out it was 72 million at that point. And here's the way Zeus kind of works. So all you got to do is click on a funny link, and there's over 10,000 variants for Android phone alone. You click on something funny, and it installs this thing, and now you're a zombie. The zombies have code that looks for credit card numbers, bank routing numbers, passwords. All right, so now it gets this and it reports it to the command and control servers. The command and control servers are monitored by botnet herders. These are the top criminals. The botnet herders get these account information. They create phony bank accounts. They transfer money to it. Somebody has to physically show up at the bank and take the money out. This is the big risky one. So they dupe people on the internet, typically thinking they made a girlfriend or a boyfriend or a love interest online, and that they've got some business and they live in a different country. They're going to get together. Hey, would you go to the bank and take out $5,000 for me? You can keep 500 of it. These are the mules are mostly duped. That's all we've arrested. As far as I know, FBI's rounded up hundreds of mules, but we've never caught anybody at the top, never fixed the virus. We can take down command and control servers, but they keep popping up. Securing applications, again, in security, you're supposed to pick on the developers. We wouldn't have to put in our security devices if these developers would just do what they're supposed to do. All right, whatever. I don't want to pick on it too much. But with every feature, you have to secure it. There's an old engineer's joke that says, most people say if it's not broke, don't fix it. But an engineer says, if it ain't broke, it doesn't have enough features yet. Ross Anderson, in his book, Security Engineering, I think says it so well. Speed to market will always trump security. And I always think of Kirk and Scotty. Scotty's never ready for something. Scotty, how much longer? Oh, don't know, Captain. Could be weeks, seconds, months, years, minutes. It could be years. I don't know. You've got 5 minutes, Scotty. And he has to do it in 5 minutes. And at the end, when they're trying to push it toward factor 10, which they, oh my God, you're insane. Scotty's sitting there with his fingers crossed. Oh, hold. Speed to market will always trump. You can't wait forever to be perfect, and you're never going to be perfect. When is it good enough? But for your test, make fun of the program. It's all their fault. Stupid developers. Now, we talked about this. Nothing new here. We should be able to go through this. We always validate length, type, and range, and I argue source. And this will help mitigate our code injection, cross-site scripting, buffer overflow attacks. And I was teaching a class one time, and I went to the NVD, and the top attacks were all those things. So it's a perfect day for me. So. All right, our database stuff. Again, I take all the clothes out of the dryer and I stick it on the guest bed. It's a flat file. I put things in the drawer. I put pants in the pants drawer. I put shirts in the shirts drawer. The ISC square says that hierarchical database is a legacy design. I put a question mark there because not my DBAs don't tell me. They go, oh, dude, if you need a relational database, do it. But if you can get away like DNS or LDAP, these are hierarchical databases. Dude, they're way faster. So I keep there just in case they make an allusion to it, but I don't believe it. My DBAs say they are not. They are certainly not legacy. And distributed just means it lives. The components live on different machines. The 3-tier database design. And now we've got all these places that we have to defend. The front end, what do people see? The view. The logical, the schema, the SQL server that ties it all together. And the physical, where are the data files, some storage area network. And there's the ANSI Spark model. This became an ISO standard. Right? The Federation likes it when it is. Now, if you look at the way it's distributed on the internet now, though, the view is distributed. The view is typically a web server that you connect to with a web browser. So that adds even more complexity. And with more parts, there's more screws to put in. There's just more things to go wrong, more places to forget to do procedures. Again, I can tie the database, an application to a database the old way, where the app talks to the database. But we like it now if I can get the kernel to do that. Now, that's not always true. That's not how your mail works. Exchange doesn't work this way. Exchange, the application, through DCOM, we'll talk to it, right? The distributed common object model. And we'll talk more about that in a few more slides here. But it is one great way to tie any application to the database. So again, if ODBC can see it, any Ring 3 app can talk to it. Right? The file is the thing, the physical thing that lives on the disk. The database is the whole system. And the database management system, the DBMS, is your administrative console to it. Now, in a relational database, we relate different tables. And each table is a two-dimensional structure. And that's a very testable term. Don't pick 3. Because I was thinking if you related them, wouldn't that become 3? No, it's a two-dimensional structure. It's a series of two-dimensional structures. All right. And in the table, these two-dimensional structures, I have columns and rows. And the columns, I put in different attributes. First name, last name, age, rank, serial number, whatever. And then I start filling it out. I add records. The fact that I decide to go first name, last name, age, phone number, blah, 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 and put that in that order, that series of columns, it's common knowledge. It's called a tuple. If you're under 50, I don't think you've ever heard anybody call this a tuple. But it's common knowledge. So I say that for a reason, obviously. It could be important in your near future. Now I enter in a record in the format of a tuple. The intersection of a row and a column is a cell, and the data element in that cell is an element. Actually, the data value is the element. Now every record has to be unique. Now at a very simplistic level, I would say first name, last name. But the problem is you might have multiple Bob Smiths. So that cannot be my primary key. So you probably have a number in the background that people don't necessarily see as part of it. Don't get too caught up in that. That's the way my DBAs tell me you always do it, but for the sake of the test, keep it simple. Every record must be unique. Whatever field or combination of fields, because it could be a combination of 2, 3 fields, first name, last name, and this number, I don't know. That's the primary key. Now, suppose I have like a database for karate school attendees, and I have the children's class, and I have the adult class, and the adult, maybe the guy is John Smith. That's a primary key. Well, look, Bobby Smith is in the children's class, and under one of the attributes or fields is parent's name. And it's John Smith or Bobby Smith. Hey, that's the same one over there. That attribute of the child's table matched the primary key of the parent table. I'll tie them together. Anytime an attribute of a table matches the primary key of another table, we have a foreign key to primary key relationship. The view controls what people see. It is common knowledge that views are always based on roles. I do not give Bob the right to see Social Security numbers. I gave it to HR. And while Bob's in HR, he inherits that capability. The schema at the logical layer on the middle tier is what ties it all together. And the data dictionary is the configuration information. It's data about the database. And when we have data about data, we call that metadata. So the data dictionary defines the metadata. Now, when I put in a field, phone number, you have to set up some characteristics about it. Does the person have to enter one? Can they put in two? Must they put in exactly two? Can two people share the same phone number? Don't memorize the different types of cardinality. It's way too granular here. Just know the term cardinality. So again, I know that in Facebook, I have two accounts. I have one for my friends at work, and I have one for my family members that say all kinds of inappropriate stuff that must be, shielded and sandboxed. I can't share a phone number. If I put a phone number to one, it takes it away from the other one. So that's due to their cardinality settings. SQL has 4 languages. SQL is an ISO standard. It's not a Microsoft thing. Microsoft may have trademarked me pronouncing it as SQL, but SQL was an IBM invention, and it wasn't structured originally. It was simple. But people who do SQL tell me, dude, it's anything but structured. But whatever. Apparently, everybody that was a hot buzzword, so people changed it. All right. When I do a lookup at, say, Google, and I search for something, I'm running data query language. When I'm, say, maybe logged into Amazon and I change my shipping address, I'm running data manipulation language. Users are typically allowed to do this. When you run data definition language, you are creating, altering, or dropping tables. This is what a lot of our SQL injection attacks go for. But the worst would be if they could run data control language. They could grant or revoke privileges. So the data dictionary, again, is our metadata, the configuration information about the database. How do I authenticate? What are the names of the views? What do people see in the different roles? Now, if I have 2 people writing to the same element at the same time, whoever checks out last is the only one that's going to be registered. If you see a concurrency problem in your near future, you have an integrity problem. So we lock it, and we know that locks don't always unlock. And that's why Marco and I found that tool called Slock. And when we went to NT, it was pretty funny. The first NT I had to administer was 4.0. 4.0 wouldn't show you who was using it. But if you ran WinFile.exe, which was still available, the 351 file manager, that worked. But then when 2000 came out, you couldn't run it anymore. That's a shame. You lost a feature. You used to be able to see who had a file open, a list of who had it open. When we check for integrity to make sure that everything's okay, we think of 2 types of integrity checks. Semantic, also known as entity integrity, says that the primary key must be unique and it can't be null, it can't be blank. Referential integrity says if I had created a relationship between a foreign key and a primary key, both entities have to exist. So if I no longer carry this product and I deleted it or something, any reference to it has to be updated. A rollback. You've got 30 fields to fill out before you can commit this. The way a database writes records is you have a big database file. But when I'm adding a record, I've got to go first name, last name. All this stuff is stored in a text file, a log file. And then when I get that last field, I go and just put in his age, his date of birth, and enter. And it commits it to the database. Well, suppose the server just crashed right in the middle of that. Our log files, it's kind of like a Microsoft Office thing. They keep temp files. Right? So hey, when the system crashed, you were right here. Do you want to save this? Because it has save points and checkpoints. So when you bring it back, maybe we got the first, you had 30 fields. We got these first 18. You're like, I'll just start over again. Just roll back to the last previously written whole transaction. I do not want any partially written transaction. It has to be all or none, because that's part of the ACID test. Atomicity says either all changes take place or no changes take place. Either all 30 fields are written or no fields were written. And it must be consistent. You shouldn't be able to put, what's your name? For. No, you got to put a name in there. Isolated. until I've done my commit, no one should be able to see it. You can't do a lookup on the data that's in the log file. But once I do commit, it should stay there. And that's durable. And that's the ACID test. Very, very testable. I actually had that on my slides and took it off. And last year, someone said, man, I had a question on the ACID test. And I was like, well, I guess that was a bad choice. I try to take, I try to phase stuff out periodically. My slides get long. My resellers don't always want to print my slides. Like, dude, you got a huge book here. I said, yeah, but there's a lot of big words and pictures. Database security, we know that databases are always vulnerable to aggregation and inference. So aggregation could be, I look up customer ID 0001, 002, 003. I wasn't supposed to be able to see the entire customer database, but I could if I aggregated it. And inference, I can just say, hey, normally I can look up the price on this, but it's suppressed today. I wonder if that's really expensive. Or maybe you're in HR. It's like, I can see everybody's salary except for these 3 new guys who also dress really nicely. Right? So you can infer certain things from a database for sure. Context versus content. I could say no one's allowed to look up social security numbers except for HR people. All right, so that would be content. They couldn't see it only, but within social security numbers are the people who can see it, HR people. I might have to do context and say, well, why are you looking it up? Because typically in your use, you have to look up when an employee calls or you're registering somebody, but you looked up 100 in an hour. That contextually does not make sense. That's not normal usage. Cell suppression, I just don't let people see that field. Partitioning comes 2 ways. If the database is acting slow and you're worried about performance, I might decide to partition the database so all records A through M run on one hard drive and N through Z will be on another one. This horizontal partition is for performance. But suppose I was worried about confidentiality and I just, I know we've revoked some views. I'm just concerned. Why don't we put the sensitive fields, social security number and salary range on a different hard drive and only give HR rights to that hard drive in general? That vertical partition is done for confidentiality. Does that make sense, guys? Very testable concept. Alrighty. Hey. All right, so data, we hit this, so we can go through this fairly quickly. Data warehousing, probably still big on the test, is when you take all the various data from various sources and put it into a giant store. I told you enterprise search doesn't have to go through that phase. It's more real time. There are security concerns. Obviously, all the data is right there. In fact, things like SAP do this for you because all the modules already talk to each other. They're enterprise resource planning systems, ERP systems, and hackers love it. Let's say hacking. People love to hack that because it's the enterprise resource planning, right? It's everything that Kirk's got for the enterprise, and it's got all the data there. So kind of the same thing here. Data mining are the tools we use to look for the patterns. Right? So, yeah, that's an unusual pattern, huh? You see it in fraud and stuff like that, and they'll probably look at it for there. But obviously, we see it in marketing more than anything. That's most of the reason people are running scripts on me, I think, are mostly to target me for marketing. As my mother would say, you know what they want, Larry? They want your money. All right, good time to take a break here. All right, it's just about 10 o'clock. Let's take a break, get back at 10:15. Sound good, everybody? All righty. Okay, welcome back, everybody. I've had this drawing with me since the 80s, the things you paste on the side of your cube. And it's just a drawing. I said the hardest part is understanding requirements. And it's true on your test. The hardest part of the test especially if English isn't your native language, is understanding the wording on this test. It's not, technology is going to be big, but that's the hardest part, understanding what this, and I say it's the hardest part in life. I really don't believe, and I don't mean to go against my mother's wishes, but my mother was in some ways very simple. She believed that God created good people and he created bad people, and we fight it out on earth, and the good people go to heaven, the bad people go not to heaven. And I just don't feel it that way. I think that there's just people, and we do what we try to do to survive. We don't always understand. We just don't follow procedures, and we often don't understand each other. So Timothy Leary, I've mentioned a few times, he said, you look at most wars, but the people that people hate the most are usually their next door neighbors. The Turks and the Greeks have been fighting. They can't stand each other. And, you know, who does the Chinese really hate more than just about anybody? Probably the Japanese. He said, because you're trying to expand and you bump into somebody. And they're there. You know, actually, Robert Anton Wilson once said, best way to keep these people, actually said, best way to keep most crimes are committed by young men. We're going to talk about that anyway. Most crimes are young men. And he said, the best way to keep these men from wreaking havoc in the cities, put them at the border and let them fight the other countries. And then they're freedom fighters. They're not causing trouble. So that's what this drawing is illustrating, that people just don't understand. As proposed by the project sponsor, this guy was not listening to the customer. There's no way the customer asked for that. But even that got lost, whispered down the lane. It's specified in the project request, as designed by the senior analyst, as proposed by the programmers. This is Larry in the field trying to make it work. And that's what the customer wanted. But we didn't listen. There's another problem in development that Marco, I always give you credit for this too. You taught me the line, if you take too long, they're going to say, yeah, that is what I wanted. Then, and you told me that in the 90s, and we've never been more like changing requirements than today. So we went through this. There's nothing new here. I just reassuring you, or re-saying, in development, you will have a feasibility. Should we develop this? Functional requirements, though, this is when you put down what must get done, and system design is how, and we know that's with specs, and that's definitely a question people typically get. At what stage in the development lifecycle are specs created? And design, I designed specifically how it should work. So again, even if you were technical, a lawyer would figure that out. Spec specifically. All right. Now, I mentioned this, when computers process information, they do it ones and zeros. I don't write like that. I can get much fewer keystrokes, 4 to 1, if I write in hex. And that's assembler. And then for this to work, I have to know not only just how to do hexadecimal conversion, but I have to know how the registers do their Boolean logic. So I have to go, all right, and then add this value to that, and then OR these, and that's a lot. That's very tedious. It's not what humans do. I would like to say, hey, get that and go there and print it over here. And these are our higher level languages. Today, it's really grown. I mean, it's not even just writing, simple of writing in some C code or whatever, or Fortran or whatever. No, you get these SDKs that are like, GUI based in many ways, and they have predefined modules, objects that you just throw together, and it can get really weird. So when when I got my first smartphone, 2009 or so, I'm still in Philadelphia. We got the place in Virginia, or excuse me, in Florida, and Shard, my girlfriend, said, hey, you got your phone? She's here. And I said, yeah. Hey, are you getting 4G? Am I getting what? 4G? Oh my God, you're such a loser. You don't even know what 4G is. Oh my God, your students think you're high tech. You're a loser. Now, all right, hold on, come there. So, no, I don't see it. It's just 3G. Well, go out, and I'm looking at the map. Go in the back of the house. No, go out on the patio. Oh, okay, I see it. Yeah. I got, how many bars you got? I got 2 bars. Okay, see how fast you're going. How do I do that? Oh, you're such a loser. Go to FCC, just go to download FCC Speed Check and put it in there. How do I download it? You don't even know how to download the app? Oh my God, you're such a loser. Just chases me constantly, guys. All right, so she walks me through it, and then I'm reading the warning. If you install this, it will have full rights to your network card. Well, I'm just doing a network test. Sure, that makes sense. It will have full access to the SDRAM. I guess so we can write results down somewhere. Maybe okay, all right. It needs access to your GPS to to figure out how far I am from the satellite? It needs to know your phone state and identity. No, it doesn't. No speed checker needs to know my phone state. That's ridiculous. I'm not sure. No, they all say that. You got to just click yes. No, I'm not clicking yes. Then you won't be able to see how fast you're going. Then I'll live without that feature. You security guys. Oh my God, I can't believe you're so worried. You're still paranoid. They all do that. Well, sure, she teases it because she picks on security. She actually is great in security. It's just that she likes to think of herself more as a project manager. So she's not out there trying to figure out how to break things. She's trying to do rollouts of new applications. So she does normally go to DEF CON, though. She gets to socially engineer those people, and she won't even let them know that she's with me. She goes, no, then they won't talk to me. No, I don't let anybody know I know you. Not that great. Anyway, so she goes to DEF CON, but this year she can't go. So we go online, and she now I get to watch it. And they did a take on this would have been July, I think, of 2010, and they did a whole thing on these development kits that came with both Android and iPhone. And they all had those features in. The SDKs themselves have it. So when you develop a guitar tuner, it has that feature. Well, if you're a good programmer in Android, you can remove those features. You can't take them out of the iPhone. But they said, yeah, but they're all stored in the iCloud, and we know that that's secure. All right, forget that for a second. So now I get really nervous when I download a port scanners. I'm looking at port scanners for my phone. And one of them, they both know how to remove features, but one left in phone state and identity. That's when I'm even more paranoid. You were smart enough to remove some features, but why do you need my phone state and identity for a port scanner? I don't trust you. And there's just so many. One of the worst is I recently installed and then deinstalled. I did it real quick because my Char told me I had to do this to get a coupon for something. She's a very good shopper. Groupon. I put the Groupon app. Anybody ever install Groupon on your phone? It is absolutely. It could be the worst, NSA hack ever. It's just insane how many writes this thing needs. And I told you, we just saw how the Android wasn't checking signatures. We looked up, Mark, I think you missed it yesterday. We went to the MITRE database, found a new vulnerability. Turns out Android hasn't been checking certificates properly. So the phones are pretty insecure, compared to everything else. And they also got a camera that you don't disable. A GPS knows where you are. Imagine creating a botnet. And you go, I want all... it spreads through Android, some kind of joke. If you go on Facebook, I'm going to make a Facebook virus that installs on your Android. Now, since it's got the Facebook has all rights, by the way. So if I could hack Facebook, I get everything. So now I can turn on your camera, I can turn on your mic, and because you have a GPS in it, I can track where you are. And now there's a meeting at the SEC, and I go, all right, turn on all phones, cameras, and microphones at this latitude, longitude, and altitude. And it's relatively trivial to do this. And I've been talking about this since that happened to me in 2010. And by 2012-ish, I get a lot of guys from Fort Meade in my class. And one guy says, yeah, they were showing us how they can do that. I was like, no! I was hoping I was just saying it's a proof of concept, but apparently we're doing it. Anyway, the source code, get this, go that, go here. That's your human level language that gets converted to machine code. That's your intellectual property. Some people have open source. They'll let you see it. Open source is considered by most hackers more secure because they can all look at it. Wireshark is open source. This Open Office I'm looking at. But you can't speak matter-of-factly about what you can't measure. I don't know if closed source is not secure until I measure a problem. So while people can feel that, and that's fine, there's a lot of things I can't measure that I still go with, I can't really measure my love for my children, but I believe it's there. I just can't speak matter-of-factly about it. Here's proof that I love you because of the two, you forgot to divide, whatever. So this source code is converted. Now, compilers take all the source code and convert it to machine code at once. And that's what most industrial strength apps are. They're compiled code. But while you're developing it, or even in earlier like basic languages, interpreted languages, read in a line at a time and convert it to machine. It's much slower. But if there's a problem, you get a error in line 145. Compiled code, when it's a virus and people have to reverse engineer what it does, you can't decompile. They can disassemble. And then now you have to be an assembly language guy to try and figure out what's going on there. So that's the challenge of all our malware guys. Our anti-malware guys. They take compiled code, they disassemble it, and they try and figure out what it's doing. It's also very important to have a third party. We said go over your source code, because whether intentionally or not, developers have to do things during development. Again, if I'm supposed to be programming the 11th level of Doom, and the normal access control procedures say the only way to get to that area of memory is if you played successfully 1 through 10. Well, that's not fair to the developer. So developers are, of course, they have to put in backdoors or hooks, maintenance hooks. But they shouldn't leave them in there. And we wanted a source code review to make sure. Source code reviews also, of course, look for our input validation problems. Hey, you're not doing any bounds checking over here. Right? Suppose the developer you hire goes out of business, and this is a business enabling software. This is a vertical app that runs your you're a dentist, you got 20 offices, and they all run on this special vertical app, and that company goes out of business. And they took source code, that's intellectual, their property, and it wasn't open source. I wouldn't want that to happen to me. So while I understand the source code is your intellectual property, I want to have an agreement in the contract that just in case you disappear and I need to make changes, I can get access to that. Put that with a trusted third party. Source code escrow, where the source code goes to a third party, is a very, very important contractual agreement in any service level agreement. Microsoft, to get used. Do you think Microsoft can just tell people, no, we're not doing source code? No, Microsoft, my understanding is it started with GE. GE wanted to start using DOS and stuff, and they said, hey, it looks good, but you're not going to protect that. You got to, like everything else we have here. So Microsoft, of course, they distribute across multiple escrow agencies. They use two-party escrow agencies. So in 2003, just before XP came out, I don't know how many people remember, 2/3 of XP was leaked because one of the escrow agencies was hacked. But because they had split knowledge procedures, at least they didn't get it all. But 2/3 of it was let go. All right, now I mentioned a machine language, sometimes called Gen 1, similar to Gen 2, Fortran, Pascal, or whatever, or Gen 3. Then you have like basic or more human-like languages, and now you get these software development kits that might be called 5GL. I don't think they're going to hit that on the test. I think generally we think of 1, 2, and 3. So it's either machine, it's assembler, or something else. Object-oriented programming. You down with OOP? You know me. Now, it makes it a lot easier. That Windows is a classic thing for me. When I mentioned earlier, you're Mitch Kapoor. You make Lotus. And every time Hercules came out with a new graphics card or Epson has a new printer, Mitch Kapoor had to also write, or his people had to write printer drivers or display drivers. But when Windows came out, they didn't have to do that. It's much more object-oriented. This application just spoke to some printer, which is actually a device driver or whatever. And then the device driver talks to the device. And it made it a lot easier. It allows me to get like this component stereo. I can get the best of breed. They're more modular, and I can just buy. I don't have to buy everything from IBM. Now, an object, and I'm going to get pretty high level. Let's say a printer at a very high level is a member of an inkjet printer is a printer. A laserjet printer is a printer. So each of these objects are members of the class called printers. But they have unique attributes. So an inkjet printer, the way its method of printing is to spray ink. But the method for a laser is to burn toner, fuse toner. And the method for, like, if anybody remembers, daisy wheels and dot matrix, dot matrix would have been firing pins. All these methods are different. But Microsoft Word just sent a message, print carrier 10 bold. And I don't care what your method is. Just print carrier 10 bold. So this is abstraction, layering, and data hiding that we talked about earlier. The printer and the word processor work at different layers. The word processor says, print carrier 10 bold. The printer does its way to do it. If he wants, you want to know how we at Epson do that? No, I don't want to know that. I really just want you to print that. So the methods are not communicated. Methods are sometimes described as black boxes. It just goes, something goes in and something comes out, and I don't care how they did it. And this makes it very modular. Now, polymorphism is described a couple of different ways. If it were me taking the test, I would say that the object is polymorphic if it can do different things depending on the input. So, for example, ipconfig, that object, if I just type ipconfig, it displays my configuration information. If I type /release, it does something else. If I say /renew, it does something else. It's a polymorphic object. If you read Sean Harris's book, she has the message as polymorphic. She says print carrier 10 bold, and each printer will do something different. Because Sean Harris wrote the book, and you know, actually I see both definitions. So Larry, what do they want on the test? I'm telling you, I don't know, but I know what I would pick. I would say it was the object. Very also confusing and related concepts, so please listen carefully. Cohesive means cohesion, to be coherent. Do you understand? Do you understand? Well, if an object only does one thing, like my Sumatra PDF reader. Let me see. I have this PDF reader, and I didn't have my drive mounted during the break, before the break, so now I can do this. If I want to open up these PDFs, I double click it. Oops, I didn't close properly before last time. I double click it and it loads. And Sumatra PDF Reader is one exe file. If I delete it, guess what breaks? Sumatra PDF Reader. Anybody ever try to delete Adobe? Adobe is not just one exe file. Adobe is hundreds of DLLs and stuff in all kinds of directories, it seems like. And when I say delete, it actually has the audacity to show me a list of modules that goes, these modules might be in use by other systems. Are you sure you want to delete this? I'm like, they might be? What do you mean they might be? You put them in there. What is it, my job? That is very, very low cohesion. And the problem with low cohesion is when I make a change, things might break that I didn't expect to break. So we like high cohesion. Now, cohesion is about how different things relate. And a highly cohesive thing would only relate to one thing. So if I knocked out the wall, I know that that wall's only job was to separate this room from that room. But if it was also a load-bearing wall and I didn't know it, that would be low cohesion. Coupling is how these things are connected together, though. Now, I could glue something down or I could screw it down. When I screw things into, I can remove them easily. When I glue something in, I cannot remove it easily. So loosely coupled is when something's screwed together. Tightly coupled is when it's glued together. And my favorite story on coupling, tight coupling, and it'll also bring back, Marco, you're just so good to have here. Darren Marriott. Oh, I shouldn't have said his full name. I'm typing it, kind of recording it. Not Darren, no, I mean Bob Smith. He used to know, he worked with us. I used to describe Darren as a cross between Kurt Cobain and Daffy Duck, but he was well, because he talked, he had a speech impediment, and he always sounded like he was stoned. But he was brilliant. Darren was very smart. So Backup Exec was brand new. Backup Exec was made from a very small company called Arcada at that point. And it was the only other way to back up. It just came out. It was a competitor to Cheyenne ArcServe. The only way to back up a Novell server was Cheyenne. Everybody hated it. So we were looking for this, you know. So we're working with them, and Darren's on the phone talking to the Backup Exec people, and Marco's in the lab. Marco, you were very upset with him. You wanted me to kick him off the phone. Marco was our manager, and Darren's on the phone. Wait a second. Your software only supports the DAPTEC SCSIs? Dude, that's ridiculous. No, they're not. No, because, dude, Compact's the #1 server on the market. No, they have their own SCSI adapters. Dude, that's ridiculous. No one's going to rip out the SCSI adapters. Dude, you got to admit, your product blows right now. And when Marco heard that, he was like, get him off the phone. Ah, come on, let him talk. Then the way I remember, he was like, oh, then he's talking about bands. I follow this guy's lives, dude. No, the drum smokes. But then he gets back and goes, no, dude, you have to write to ASCII. ASCII. It's an intermediate driving set that all the SCSI vendors are talking. You work with ASCII. Dude, AdapTech is like on the board. So they are totally on work with AdapTech SCSIs and then we're saying that's awesome. But that's what he got them to do. I think he may have been the guy. I remember that conversation well. They were tightly coupled. The developer knew that he had to somehow get data from a hard drive and put it onto a tape drive. And one of the best known vendors for this SCSI interfaces was AdapTech. So they wrote to the AdapTech hardware, to the firmware on their controllers, and figured we'll just tell people buy AdapTech controllers. They're totally blessed by our system. But there was a new initiative called ASCII, and it was an intermediate driver set that allowed you to make your function calls to the ASCII set, and then the ASCII you'd have a separate ASCII driver for every piece of hardware. And AdapTech was on the board to start that. So now it worked with any controller. So it was tightly coupled or hard-coded, and now it's loosely coupled, and that's a lot easier to make changes. All right, so how do both of these affect change management? If you're taking a test or in real world and you make a change to something, and something else broke, you didn't expect it. Why did that have anything to do with it? You had a cohesion problem. The coupling was not obvious. But if you have make a change and you go, boss, I could change you want to upgrade, say, the VPN endpoint, but our VPN concentrator is actually built into our firewall. No, we ran the VPN set on top of it. So if we change the VPN, we're going to have to change firewalls too. You knew it, but it was tightly coupled, that's all. So if you know during a change that you got to change more than just the one thing you wanted, you have a coupling problem. If you find something broken later on that you didn't expect to break, you had a cohesion problem. All right, so we said we have different Ring 3 VMs on a machine. This is like the operating system says every application gets to run in its own hotel room, and this process isolation will prevent from accidental or deliberate tampering of instructions and data. But I like them to talk. I like cut and paste. That's how most of these slides are created. So through the common object model, we allow inter-process communication so long as it doesn't violate the policy. And over a network, we have DCOM, and that's how Exchange and Outlook, for example, talk to each other. When we were talking about sockets, just IP and port numbers, how I identify each flow. Well, in DCOM, it's different. You use the very testable GUID, the globally unique identifier. Anybody ever have to restore an Exchange server here? I'll bet you had to change the GUID. And I'll bet it was around 3 o'clock in the morning when you finally got somebody on third level support to go, it's a resource kit utility. Object linking and embedding, two very nice features. I can take a PowerPoint slideshow and embed it into a Word document. That's great. Gives me a lot of functionality. You don't even need PowerPoint to play it back. And when I update the original, you have an out-of-date version. So embedded objects might be tough to maintain version control. So I wouldn't have that problem if it was just a link. A link, you would point to my update. Every time I update, you'd get the link. But it's very common that developers have all kinds of libraries available to them in the development lab. And they might not realize, maybe through cohesion issues, low cohesion, that they're dependent upon a module that's there in development. Then they zip they put everything up on a CD and put it out, and then you go to install it and it doesn't work. So you have broken link issues. I am Nomad, I am perfect, but I am the creator and I am imperfect. So you are imperfect. No, warning. Remember the episode. I don't really believe in this stuff, but I believe we get great features trying. So the expert system we know need to be trained, like optical character recognition. This is an A, this is an A, this is an A. Actually, it was only about 80% accurate, right? 85 maybe, but not all of them. I actually did one for the Social Security office in Delaware. And Wang was really big into this stuff. And everything I scanned was just like a 3x5 card or something. And it was always scanning for the same 3 locations for data. It was always in the same font type. So it was whatever. It's like first name, social security number, blah, 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 blah. Always in the same fields, the same font. This thing was near 100% accurate. But that's because it had a very limited amount of data to deal with, right? The neural network, though, theoretically would work on its own. Now, so you don't sound silly to your colleagues. I don't know the right answer, but I'm going to tell you my experience, especially you SPAWAR guys, because you have some brilliant guys in this field. I've had a few, and they're smarter than me, and they don't agree. I find that 2 out of 3 people will tell me, this is my swag, my scientific wise guess, that 2 out of 3 people say there's no such thing as a neural network. They are all expert systems. And then 1 out of them will say they are. And both or all 3 of these people are smarter than I am. So I'm just going to get you through on the test. Expert systems must be trained. Neural networks train themselves. They have the ability to remember. They learn from experience. The expert system uses rule-based logic. That's if this is true, then sick to see that that's true. A knowledge engineer or a subject matter expert, somebody trains the database. And this is like me doing optical character recognition. Now, as I'm training it, I'm giving it samples. This is a letter A. This is a letter A. I'm building up the knowledge base. But then when it sees a new letter and it goes, wow, that's awfully A-like, it's the inference engine that's taking over. So please remember the 2 components, the knowledge base and the inference engine. An artificial neural network would work if it could chop wood by basing itself on the neural structure of the human brain. And Marcus, see how much influence you have on me? I can't look at this robot without thinking of you telling me about Lost in Space, and it bothered you that here they are in the future, and all that they've come to as a robot, when something goes wrong, can drive, wave his arms wildly in the air, going, morning, morning, morning. That's what you came up with. And I already said this part, but I really love this book. I just think, it's funny. I used to read it to all my kids, but my youngest one, when she was like 2, she had memorized it. It was so cute. I'd get to, you'll come to a place where the streets are not marked, some windows are lighted, but mostly they're dark. I said, honey, you gotta put a video camera on this. You gotta record this. And I don't know, there's something about children and video cameras that make them stop doing the cute thing, and all of a sudden she's sticking her butt out, going, it's like my stinky butt. I'm like, honey, what'd you do what you were doing before? Oh, forget it. So we never got it. Future flailing robots. That's it. That was, yeah, I knew you would remember that one. Mobile code, we already said, there's lots of them. Shockwave and Java, JavaScript is not Java. It's a whole different animal. Java is applets I download. JavaScript are instructions for me to do things on my machine. Much more dangerous, actually. But Java did make sure that there was a Java interpreter or a virtual machine for every platform. So that's cool. So Java is more portable. I can run it across multiple machines. You download bytecode, which is then run inside this VM. It's sandboxed. Now, Java gave us the ability to digitally sign. Spock, yes, Captain. What does Java use for its security scheme? A, sandboxing. B, digital signatures. They are both true, Captain. Well, it doesn't say select all that apply. It says select one. Well, they are both technically true, Captain. I have a hunch, Spock. They want the sandbox. You always talk about the Java and the sandbox. In fact, it's the first thing that came to my mind. So that's what I would pick. ActiveX, though, only sends. It doesn't do anything else. And again, just because I know where it came from, even if that was true, if you couldn't spoof these credentials, it doesn't really mean it's good. Oh, Kirk, scared. Or malware. We've already hit these things. Viruses, worms, and Trojans, they all do the same basic payloads. The difference is how do they propagate. A rootkit, we talked about it. Rootkits don't give you root privileges, right? They help the attacker maintain it. You get root and then you plant it. Logic bombs. Some time or event-driven malware. This is the Michelangelo virus. On the anniversary of spyware. Spyware used to be advertising-supported software, and maybe that's what they still want if they even ask it. You know, it's things that they hijack your web default page and stuff like that. But to me, spyware is also these, you know, like net nanny things. Get the hiccups here. I get all excited when I talk. And Kirk, you just scared me. There's a CEH question I had to prepare people for. I hated it. Bob is concerned with what his daughter is doing on the computer, his teenage daughter. He doesn't want her to know about his concerns, so he's looking for some software that would allow him to remotely view what she's doing without sending her an alert. He'd also like something that logs all the people she talked to and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, don't do it, Bob. Don't do it, Bob. My answer is, you can put some preventive controls with your kids in some direction, but I do not want to view anything that I can't unsee of my daughter. I've got a teenage daughter. She mails a picture to her boyfriend. You know, it may not be appropriate, but I don't want to see it. So I'm not into these spyware things, but it could be on there, you know, and they certainly are all over the place. I mean, Johnny Long came out with a book in like 2004, 2005. If you've never seen it, it's still one of the greatest books in security. Google hacking for pen testers. It actually says penetration testers. But he showed among these camera hacks, and it's just crazy how many people still don't protect their cameras. So they plug in a webcam so they can view their house from, you know, when they're outside, but so can everybody else. It's just so bad. So that would, you know, spywares would take, but they still might be in advertising supported software. And the bots and the botnets, that's the big problems. All right, so quickly here. Virus has two parts. All malware does. It's replication mechanism and the payload. Now, I don't see the form or stoned because these are zoo specimens at this point. They've been contained. A virus that's currently spreading, Zeus, is in the wild. A virus is a companion to a program. It attaches itself to some other program. Now, macro viruses, we said, like my word macro, that was easier to create, you know, because of the simplicity of these macro languages. Boot sector viruses didn't just infect the boot sector. Stoned in form, when you rebooted it came back. They also infected the file system. They had multiple parts. If you see a reference to a multipartite or partite, that's what they're talking about. Felipe, true, I had a conversation with a workmate about his IP camera being on his network. Then I proved to him as a vulnerability from the outside of his house. Exactly. Exactly. It's bizarre. It's bizarre. Ralph did one, and a CEH class I think he was teaching, and I sat in. I happened to be teaching the same building, and I had a day off. So I was sitting there, and he brings up some Japanese family's camera, and he goes, all right, and you see these people sitting at home. This has pan, tilt, and zoom. And he goes, you see these people sitting at dinner. And he zooms over and he goes, hey, daughter's pretty cute. And then he zooms in and they had a dog food bowl. I don't know why it made everybody laugh. He just zoomed in on the dog food bowl and he goes, I don't look like Alpo. But whatever, this is crazy. You know, big brother may not be watching you all the time, but if you don't have controls, little brother very well could be. Right? And the phone hacks are just as bad. All right, so viruses don't want to be detected. So a stealth virus is something that goes out of its way to elude detection. And they've done compression over the years. They've also done things that where they don't actually execute all the time. So that's called a sparse infector. I don't know if they ask about that. But that would be like, I'm only going to execute every 100th time you run me. Or you know, maybe as part logic bomb on the first of every month. But most of what we think today is polymorphic. And polymorphic, I mentioned earlier, they use encryption. They generate a nonce and they XOR themselves with that nonce, and then the loader knows how to decrypt. Retroviruses are probably not a testable term, but I've taught a number of classes for particularly Symantec, and they use the term. They said, now we're seeing boot sector viruses come back, and we call them retroviruses. The other thing is that people, to make your antivirus scanning faster, they remove signatures for things they thought were contained. Well, good, I can put them back. I can start doing it again. The worm we know is network aware. It produces on its own. You know, if you want a lesson, the SQL Slammer was spreading 55 million hosts per second. Most of the damage was done in about 10 minutes. Let me see something. In a half-hour period. 55 million hosts per second. So it's amazing. Just amazing how, and that's that's a dozen years ago, right? SQL Slammer was like 2002, something like that. And then they have these polymorphic as well. You know, they can. Most of these are encrypted today. They're very tough to find these things with antivirus software. In fact, I should probably put something in there. I haven't even installed it myself. Laura Chappell for bots. Under. That's it. Putting it under. She feels that these guys are the best. Botnet Hunter is basically doing traffic analysis, and that's a very testable concept because the data is encrypted, and these bots are SSH, channels, most of them, and so they're encrypted. So all we can do is look at the patterns of traffic. So it's all traffic analysis because of the polymorphic codes. The only way we can do it is through traffic analysis. Blended attacks. It's an email that contained a Trojan that had a worm in it. Oh, we've all seen logic bombs. This was a logic bomb that they played a Bugs Bunny. I've seen Yosemite Sam and Daffy Duck try this when he was going to hit that one note, and Bugs Bunny just avoided it. Dun, 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 bloom, 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 bloom. All right. Trojan horse. It's disguised as a handy utility. It's a backdoor keylogger. Some favorite Trojans over the years. Oh, the most recent one was the e-cigarette, right? E-cigarette. How do you spell cigarette? I don't know. Cigarette, USB Trojan. Yeah, vaping can now lead to viruses. Just awesome. But they've had them for, there was mock mechs on digital picture frames. It was the gift that keeps giving. Because anything you mounted as a drive letter also got infected. And I don't know that we ever cleaned it. The only way to get rid of this was to wipe the machine and start over again. And then there was the USB Energizer charger that contained a Trojan. Yeah, what you need to know, a risk of security breach, backdoor found in the internet. Hey, if I were building all your equipment and I wanted to take over the world, I'd probably do stuff like that too. I don't know. I really ultimately want to know that when I drink water, it's water and that doesn't contain any mind control stuff. All right, spyware, again, the advertising supported stuff. There was a time when they made an agreement with the antivirus vendors, too, not to get rid of it. So you had to get two, right? Everybody my age or older remembers you had to get Spybot, Search and Destroy. You had to get adware, and you had to run both. Phishing attacks. That's social engineering. Remember, the only countermeasure to social engineering is training. Right? And even that's not 100%. There's no, no patch for stupidity. My mother tried patching me, but no, I keep making a lot of the same mistakes. All right, I don't need to read this for you, but it's a neat document to have if you're tracking things down. 800-83. So what did you see? What is it likely? Pretty cool. Closing up, there's in the old days, in the 90s, HTTP is a very static thing. So when people put up websites, they were just like their Yellow Pages ad. There was no dynamic content. In order for this to happen, you had to tie it to a back-end database. And they create a set of standards called CGI, the Common Gateway Interface. Most of our SQL injection, code injection attacks are actually classified as CGI attacks, right? The CGI exploits. You know, there's a SQL command to get a command prompt. So people would insert that and then get a C prompt on their system through a SQL injection. Lovely. All right, so we really should have been very familiar with the SDLC, a little bit more about database technologies, distributed environments, artificial code, mobile code, but the most testable. If you're going to put your attention in one area, please know the malware, because no matter what version of the test you get, you'll get malware. All right? Everybody feel good with that module? Yes, fantastic. All right. One more module to go. This is a little longer because they changed operations. They did remove vulnerability assessment from here, so okay, so that made it a little smaller. We did our pen testing yesterday. Oh, wrong one. But they added in. They took the incident response and they took disaster recovery, and they added them here. So we had some of the legal earlier. I got to pull out and save some of that legal stuff, but we're going to see more on the actual. Before we saw legal requirements, now we're going to see what do we do when we have an incident. So it's really part of business continuity management. I don't really think it fits neatly in this domain exactly, unless you're going to break out, you know, we designed our procedures before and here we're running them. Because when I look at the SDLC, if this is operations, I should have already been running stuff. I'm monitoring and auditing and maintaining, you know, patch maintenance. But we're going to be up in architecture right now. We're actually going to be doing functional requirements. We're going to be doing a business impact assessment in this domain. So that's all over. That's our risk assessment again. So I don't know that it neatly fits here, but we'll figure it out. By the way, I like this quote because when I first started in computers, I remember I got a job at Micro Age Computer Store. You know, it would have been the Best Buy of the day or whatever. And someone bought our first big sale, 6 or so computers, and we didn't have a truck yet. We're a brand new store, and we hire a truck driver as low budget van guy, and he drives me to the city for it's like 40 minutes on listening to this guy tell me, well, I'm not going to have a job anymore. I'm all excited. I just got my computer certificate. You know, I've been working for like 6 months in the field, 8 months in the field. I came from computer land. I went to Micro Age. And he's like, yeah, no, I was watching this stuff on TV. They said they're going to make these things so easy a monkey could fix them. Yeah, you ain't going to have a job. They're going to be so foolproof. And I was sitting there, you know what? You show me a more foolproof system. I'll show you a bigger fool. Foolproof my tuchus. All right, so we're dealing with it from an ops point. We're going to deal with configuration management, knowing what we have and controlling any changes. You know, it's the operations staff that releases changes. Developers can make changes. Testers test it. Operations staff load it. Separation of duties. And asset management. We really covered that in our own asset security, so nothing new here. Part of that should be license management. Now, another great time from the Marco days. Marco and I used to do a thing called Sabre meter. And Microsoft, for instance, sells their applications per active user. License per active user. So even though, for instance, we might have had 100 people that needed Microsoft Project, we only had 10 licenses and only 10 simultaneous users. So through Sabre Land Meter, you would, if you were the 11th guy, you would get a list of who's still in it. You go, oh, I'm sorry, all the licenses are out, and here's who's using it. So you can call, hey, Bob, are you actually using it? No, could you log out because I need it? That was pretty cool. But then we got Walker Richard Quinn's Reflections, a terminal emulator. That was licensed per seat, whether the user was using it logged in or not. It's like, all right, so much for that. Then you get stuff like Checkpoint. Checkpoint licenses you per IP address. You got 4 NICs in the server, you have 4 licenses. Then you get stuff like Core Impact. Per IP address, per engagement, every time you do it. So you got to know your license requirements, or else, you know, awareness is your #1 countermeasure. If you don't know, you might be breaking the law. I showed up The Desert Storm, when that was going on, one of my big clients was AT&T in Bedminster, New Jersey. And I showed up there, and I forget if we talked about it. I think I did in asset management. I think I brought this up to you. I thought there was a terrorist in the building. No, my manager was giving out licenses, and he said, Larry, my crime, if I have 100 licenses out there, I bought them. I just didn't track them properly. So it's important. Capacity planning, how much disk will you need? How much bandwidth over the WAN? It's just crazy. People don't think of these things. Fault management. You know how many times I hear the story about the guy who had the RAID array and it went down? And it's like, wait a second. No, we have RAID 5. It should have been able to tolerate a failed disk. It did 2 months ago. It's been beeping in a closet. And now the second drive died. But most testable here. Business continuity management. I told you it was when it was on its own domain. It was my most commonly failed domain. I have a feeling this is going to take that on. And it's probably, in my mind, because it's a paradigm shift. Don't think confidentiality. Think availability. It's all about availability. All right, so we have different people involved in different roles. Anybody supporting day-to-day operations. So I don't need to read these down to you. Do know, I think I pointed out, that security is a passive role. We don't have configuration rights. IT gets to implement it. There's a guy, a firewall admin, he's an IT guy. I get to say to the, I work with the sales department, and they say, we need these ports open. And I give that requirement to the custodian, and that custodian does it. Now, I can't prevent them from making other changes that they weren't supposed to. And we know when you can't prevent, you detect. I have the ability to monitor their work. And we talked about this in the lifecycle management. Quality assurance creates evaluation specs throughout the lifecycle to make sure that at the end you have a valid product. It's there to prevent you from in the wrong picture of a dog tied to a fence there. Quality control people perform those evaluations at each level. So they're verifying, did they do that? Did they do that? And they're there to detect problems along the way and correct it so we don't have a problem, at the end. Media, we can't use the same tape. Oh, Philippe, I explain this all the time, but most organizations have their, yes, they do. Absolutely, I have seen that. So my experience was you had the network guy became the security guy, the router guy. And I have a theory. It's because you think of, we have policies, and then we have people who enforce the policy. Most policy enforcement problems, I believe, are in traffic. So if any of you in my class have had a policy enforcement guy, a policeman, stop you and tell you you're breaking a policy, I'm willing to bet it was a traffic policy. They probably don't come in your house and tell you you were doing something wrong. It's almost always in traffic. So that's what network guys do. They monitor traffic. So that's where most of our policy enforcement happen. But we do need to separate them. Police cannot police themselves. Some of the worst guys, when we talked about proxy servers, and I said, yeah, the application layer proxy and circuit level proxies. One of the most famous circuit level proxies, there's freeware versions all over the place, is called SOCKS. For socket, right? So it's IP and port number. My experience where most SOCKS proxies are, it's set up at some guy's home, an admin who knows that he's not, you got all these rules that you can't get anywhere. And he's got all whatever, you got content inspection, and I'll be at a site, hey, I can't get to the site. Where do you need to go, dude? I can get anywhere. And he's got an SSH channel to his proxy at home. It's your network guys enforce the rules and they know how to break them. Now, we have to determine when we're going to back up. And again, I can't just back up financial data every night. I got to back it up in real time. I do not want to sit there with ngrok. I'll have to look that one up. I do not want to have to say my banking records restore from last night. They got to be in real time. I have some things that I can back up every night. See how many stories I have with you, Marco. We did the backup for Scott, and we would like to have done a full backup every night. Let me show you what happened to the full backup. In a full backup, Now, these are my files. I own them. I'm the owner, so Microsoft said at my discretion I can do things. I can give people, security things. But I also have an attribute of a file. Archive. Very testable, guys. So if you're not paying attention, please let me get your attention here. The archive bit or attribute of a file is used for when I do backups. So if I do a full backup, I clear this. Boop. I back up everything and I clear it. And if I could, I'd like to do a full backup every night. But at Scott Paper, that took 30 hours. So that wasn't going to work. So we back up everything Friday night, goes into Saturday. Then Monday, a new file's written. Boop, it gets changed. The archive bit said it needs to be backed up. Well, we tried to do differentials. In a differential, I would back up only things that have this, but I won't clear it. So Monday we'll get Monday's changes. But Tuesday we'll actually get Monday and Tuesday's changes. Wednesday. By the time I get to Friday, if I had a failure, I would only need 2 tapes. I'd need the last full and the last differential. We'd have it whatever was different. But our differentials were taking like 6 hours by Tuesday, and we only had a 6-hour window. So that's not going to work. So we do differentials. Differentials, I do a full backup on the Friday, it runs till Saturday. Monday, it backs it up, and it clears it. Any new changes get backed up and cleared. So Monday we'll get Monday's changes, Tuesday gets Tuesday's changes. Wednesday only gets Wednesday. And now if I have to restore, there's a failure on, say, Friday, I need the last full. I need Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday's incremental. I need 5 tapes. Does that make sense, everybody? Felipe makes sense. I got a story that could help engineer, and it's one of the worst things that ever happened to me. Marco, are you there? Because it's one of my students' favorite stories, one of the worst mistakes I've ever made, and it helps people. All right. Do you remember the Treasury server fiasco when I had to replace a failed mirror drive? See if it rings a bell. That's it. We hadn't migrated Treasury yet. This was not in our design yet. So this was not our server. But I had a reputation of doing a lot of Novell hardware. I had come up through that field. And there was a problem on this server. It was an intermittent, like GPI, and they had CompuCom for their service organization. And Carol comes up to us, this is a Scott Paper manager, and he says, Larry, we've had CompuCom looking at this server for like 3 months. It's intermittently going up and down. Could you take a look at it? Sure, I take a look at it. And I did something only a senior level Novell engineer would know. I believe I looked in the error log. And in the error log, I could see that there were a drive intermittently dropping out. Well, they had a compact server, and it was going to an external SCSI controller. They didn't use compact. Compact SCSI external drives, external cabinets weren't hot swappable yet. So they had those legacy storage systems. Remember those, Marco? They were hot swappable. All right. So in the thing, I could see that SCSI ID 0 and SCSI ID 1 were a mirrored set. And SCSI ID 0 is intermittently going down. So I believe it's probably a failed drive. So I order a drive, and I schedule, or I tell Lydia, I said, look, I think I know what it is. And she, are you sure? And I said, no, but I'm sure it's the first thing I'll do. I'll schedule downtime over the weekend. I order the drive, and I realize, oh, dude, wait, the 30-hour backup window. What we have is 2 backup servers backing up like, 15, 14 servers. So the one that had Treasury, I was looking at it, I was like, dude, it's going to probably hit Treasury somewhere like 6, 7 in the morning, and then the backup's going to stop there if I'm working on it, and say, error reading. And I didn't want to, all the ops guys would have to do is say skip. I didn't want to bother any of the ops guys. So I removed it from the ARC serve rotation. I would do my own backup of the Treasury server. We had our own test server. Friday night, I realize it's time to go. I go, oh, dude, you still got to back up the Treasury server. I go to build my ArcServe server. I can't find the ArcServe disks. And the way I remember, Mark, I believe I paged you to see if you knew where they were. I didn't get a hold of it. I'm trying to find the article. They should have been there. All right, so now I got Novell's S Backup. I'll use Novell's built-in S Backup tool. You know, it doesn't have sophisticated scheduling or anything, but hey, you know, at least I'll get a backup. And I'm not going to need it because I've got another drive. It's a mirror drive. All right, so I kick that off. And then I come in Saturday morning and I'm going to do my work, but I look at the log, did it back, everything back up. Error reading rconsole.hlp, file corrupted, backed up. All right, but everything else worked fine. Okay, whatever. All right, now, and I'm going to describe what took a weekend in a couple seconds here, a couple minutes. But this is really a very busy weekend. It's my mother's birthday. I'm supposed to be prepping to make her a barbecue on Sunday. She had to have lamb kebabs on her birthday. So I'm prepping all this stuff. So I'm running back. Tell the wife, I was married at the time, hey, I'm going to go. I got to do this. It's only going to take me about an hour and a half. I'll be back, 2 hours tops. I get down there. I get the new drive. I pop it in. It's hot swappable. I don't have to worry about anything. Boop. And it shows up. But it showed up in the Novell server as disk 3. Novell enumerated drives in the order in which it saw them. So what was SCSI ID 0 showed up as drive 1, disk 1, and what was SCSI ID 1 would show up as drive 2, and to Novell, the mirror was between 1 and 2, not between this 3. What is this disk? Son of a gun. Hot swappable means nothing to us. Because in our scenario, you still have to reboot. Now I got to reboot the server. So I reboot the server. That adds another like 15 minutes to my time. It comes back up there, disk 1. All right, mirroring is established. And I am now mirroring my new blank drive to the existing good drive. No! 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 Larry, that other drive was only intermittently bad. Maybe you can get that back. No. And this is not 5 minutes, I'm telling you. This is hours of me fiddling. I put it back. It's not reading. I mean, I could get it to read a little bit, and then it would fail. It wouldn't let me do, I got to go from tape. I go now. I got everything in there, and I got to restore from tape. And it gets about like 8 files in. Error reading rconsole.hlp. File corrupted. Abort or fail. Those are my choices. Abort or fail. Where is Skip? What is the difference between abort and fail? Who's the wise guy here? It is now Sunday night when I realize it's not going to happen, dude. And I call Iron Mountain to get the tapes, and they said, who was calling? I said, Larry Greenblatt, you're not on our list. This is an emergency. Can you tell me who's on that list? The primary was Vince. Vince left, Marco. He was already at Wyeth. I said, he hasn't worked here in a year. Harold Buchanan. I call Harold. 10 o'clock on a Sunday night. Or I call Harold. And he calls. Well, they delivered those tapes. And I had Monday, I had the full, it worked. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and third, all the tapes worked. But keep in mind, Larry had removed from Friday's rotation, and I lost all the treasury data for a Friday. I figured I'm done. I'm done. I'm not going to be working in computers again. I'm done. IBM sales reps don't cover for goofy guys that do stuff like this. I think that was Janet's account. She would have gladly had me thrown out of there to make anybody happy. I get out of there. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I'm going to be working at the beer distributor up the street from my mom. Somebody will drive by us in a Honda. Go, yeah, you should drive me one of them. Hey, you need help carrying that to your car, sir? I go home. I take a shower. I go back to work. 7:30 or so, she calls. Networking, this is Larry. Larry, this is Lydia. What happened? I explained to her. Oh, my God. It was the hard drive? I don't know what the hell she told. Oh, the original problem. Well, it looks that way, Lydia. Let's give it a couple weeks, make sure. Oh, I can't believe it. Hey, everybody, Larry fixed it. It was the hard drive. I said, Lydia, did you hear me? We lost all of Friday's data. I have nothing on. Oh, my God. Oh, I can't believe you. Larry, you go home and get some sleep. Oh, well, you poor thing. I saw what time you logged out of here. Don't you worry about Friday. We have it on paper. Yes, I was a hero. If she wanted to get rid of me, though, that would have been my last day. That was terrible. That was one rough install. One rough support. All right, did I lose anybody there? I do remember. I do remember a hot swap live demo for a first client Sky. I didn't reconnect the basket. Oh, dude, that was so bad. It was so bad. I really thought I was gone. The great save, Rainey, was that I'm mostly nice to people, so she just thought I was a nice guy and figured she'd let me go for my mistakes. And I think that's it. I always, it's the old, forgive me my trespasses as I forgive those who trespass against me. I don't expect people to be perfect. I sure hope they don't expect it from me. All right, let's do a couple more slides here. Tape rotation policy. You can't use the same tape over and over again. So you come up with a rotation. Maybe you keep your dailies for weeks or whatever. You keep your weeklies for a month. You keep your monthlies for a year. Oh, you sure do learn a lot when you have mistakes, don't you? When I installed something and everything worked right out of the box, I don't remember how that worked. Larry, you're an expert on that. And I'm like, well, I am. But when I had a problem and was up there till 3, 4 in the morning, I remember that stuff. All right. RAID, we'll get through this and then we'll go. It's actually not just RAID here. We're going to talk a little bit about eliminating multiple points of failure. So we have RAID, a disk thing, remote, what do they call it? Redundant array of inexpensive. You kind of expect to go bad when it was all, yeah. The thing was, I was just telling my wife, my ex was actually not an easy person to please. So when I told her I'd only be 2 hours, and the next thing you know, I'm there, that didn't go over well. Anyway, so RAID, the redundant array of inexpensive or inexpensive disks. Now, if I took all of these disks, the concept is this controller speaks at light speed. These disks are mechanical speed. So the time it takes me to write a 1, spin a disk, write a 0, and then spin it, I could just go 1, 0, 1, boom, stripe it all across the disk. If I stripe my data across these disks evenly, I have a lot of great performance for writing data. Reading data, not so easy, because I don't know. In writing data, everybody go to the first free available space you have. But in reading, go to the exact location where you put that. And I have another problem. If one of these disks dies, I lose everything. So I don't know why RAID level 0 is called RAID. It should have been called AID. There's no redundancy. Now, the Novell solution I just talked about was actually duplex, they called it. You're not likely to see duplex. Duplex meant I had 2 controllers. So whenever I write data to one drive, I wrote it to another drive. And the advantage of duplexing was, with 2 controllers, I don't just get controller redundancy. I can interleave reads. You get a piece, you get a piece, you get a piece, you get a piece. Now, you don't have to have 2 controllers today. We have multiple channels on our controllers. Right, so here's 5 channels on there. So you can get that advantage. Hardware mirroring can provide much better reads than striping. But I want some redundancy. So striping with parity is, well, originally we had RAID level 3. I never saw RAID 2. RAID level 3, you would have a dedicated parity drive. So if it was supposed to, add up to an odd number, I would each one. And if any one drive dies, the parity drive could take over. But if it doesn't, nothing dies, it's a wasted drive. And striping across 5 drives is faster than striping across 4. So they came up with RAID 4 was very similar to RAID 3, bit versus block level. And in my experience, RAID 4 was out for about 2 weeks when RAID 5 came out. In RAID 5, I striped the parity information as well. So the parity doesn't necessarily live on one disk, it lives across all. If anyone dies, they all take over. From an electronic standpoint, this is as fast as striping. It's not as fast because of the overhead of writing the parity, but mechanically I'm getting the advantage. Now, do you normally read or write to your operating system? That's a TCP question. We read it, you read. So it makes more sense in many cases to mirror your OS. But for writing and for the cost savings, you may decide, it was very, very popular, it still is, RAID 5, the data. But really depends on your needs. Some people found that they still got better performance, but they wanted to add redundancy. They could mirror their drive, their 0 arrays. So RAID 10 is really a mirrored RAID 0. But maybe because you're reading better, maybe it was better to array a bunch of mirror sets. Now, I don't have it written here, but, well, actually, if the people in the Department of Redundancy Department could mirror RAID 5s. But this particular graphic I dug up, I know that they changed 2 colors for a different reason. They wanted me to know that this isn't like RAID 5 where the usable disk space is n-1. I have a feeling this is n-2. And I think of this as lug nuts. Lug nuts on my car, I believe you can hold on a tire with 3 lug nuts. But, you know, if it falls off, people could die. So what's the cost of a lug nut? I'll put a 4th. People could die, I just said. Put on a 5th. RAID 6 is n-2. So I could update this slide here, but I don't feel like doing it right now live. Failover, we generally think of servers or routers. If this goes down, we'll fail over to that one. Failover is nice, but if everything stays up, it's a wasted CPU cycle. So clustering, you know, this is what we mostly think of in our clouds and stuff like that, and distributed processing. Maybe you have 5 servers all clustered in, say, a Citrix metaframe setup, and then if any one goes down, they're still running. You know, I get scalability as well because I add another server. I can handle more users, but I also get fault tolerance. Cool. All right, what time we got? 11:25ish. Let's you know, I'll go 5 more minutes. Let me go 5 more minutes, and we'll break at 11:30. Oh, if you want more on RAID, I would take a look at this website. They have some nice animations and stuff. Pretty cool. RAID.edu, they call it. They do, I have heard for though, most people do get a question on RAID 0, RAID 1, and RAID 5. We talked about separation of duties. Marco, you used a term earlier, segregation of duties. That's the NIST term. And in ISO, they sometimes refer to it as mutual exclusion. The principle of mutual exclusion. So you cannot, for example, be a programmer and a tester. You cannot be a tester and an operator. You cannot be an operator and a programmer. And the question might come at you something like, if the security manager has responsibility for application review, which other role would present a conflict of interest? And the answer is administration. That would be operations. Common knowledge. All right, we have to control changes. We talked about change management before as part of lifecycle management. What changes to our, what's TCB again? Anybody remember what TCB stood for? I'll give you a hint. It means both Spock said it was good and then Kirk said it was good. Spock certified, Kirk accredited. Therefore, this is our trusted computing base. I asked you to recognize that acronym. All right, technically, Spock is testing technology changes and make sure that he's got everything worked out. But Kirk wants to make sure that you time it properly, that you log what you did, that the people are trained on how to use the new one, that you document what you did. You back up the old version, you test the change, you create a new valid config. And then I said, we'd like to be able to back out to a previous state if we could, but you can't always do that. So you have a contingency, a fallback. And you maintain a configuration management database, the CMDB, very, very testable. We must log. Marco and I maintain changes.txt. And whenever an admin logged in, you saw changes.txt. And we'd maintain it for a month, and then we'd archive them. But it was a big no-no if something changed over the weekend and it wasn't logged there. You know, we have a database for that. We were in the old days at those times. Administrative, again, Kirk wants to make sure that you ensure documentation, that you didn't change the trading systems during trading hours. You worked a long weekend. Everybody thought that because I have a Jewish last name, I could work Catholic Christian holidays. My mother's Irish Catholic, and I was just glad to have a job. So I remember I did the first NetWare 3 install in the Delaware Valley, and I did it on Easter, and my mother was so, you couldn't work Easter, Larry? Oh, God. He's so important. He has a beeper and everything, like a doctor. And ensure any affected party is aware it's coming, trained on how to use the new one, consulted before you make the change, informed after the change. We mentioned this before. All right, now it's a good time to take a break. So it's just about 11:30. Everybody good? Take a lunch. Get back here at 12:30. Does that work for everyone? Does anybody need a longer lunch? Usually on Fridays, people want to get done early, so I'm trying to be sensitive. Oh, okay, 12:30 is good. I like it. Back at, I should say, back. Awesome. Thank you, guys. See you soon. Recording. All right, people, welcome back. We already covered a bit of this. I do want you to keep in consideration a design consideration for your DMZ networks. And it's not just for email. I want you to think of email and DNS. They both have internal and external uses. We have Bob sends Alice a mail and they work for the same company. The DNS server says, oh, you want the mail server, it's over here. And the mail server says, oh, you want to send this to her, I'll store it. And when she goes over that mail server, she gets it. But when you're sending mail to, say, someone at NIST.gov, well, my server, I don't have a DNS entry for NIST.gov. So you do a recursive lookup, a DNS recursive lookup. And by the way, for Wireshark guys, it's a good thing to watch how people tune. There's a number of ways to do recursive lookups. Oh, that's nice. Everyone sees my. Why does that doesn't happen automatically? But anyway, a recursive lookup is so I'll go. Hey, where's mail.nist.gov? Mail.nist.gov. Hold on, my DNS server goes out to a mail DNS server. Who's authority for the .govs? I am the root server. Could you find out? And then the two ways they can reply. No, we stop later. The two ways that things can reply back to you. And this is a little out of scope probably for the test, but it's important if you're doing performance. I could have the server at NIST, say name server 1 at NIST.gov will actually feed the results back to me. Or slower, they feed it back to the root DNS who feeds it back to me. But either way, I've got to have port 53 open to my DNS server to get that response. Well, opening up port 53 all the way to your internal DNS is very, very risky. So it's best practice to have an external DNS in your DMZ with no records on it. It just does a recursive lookup for you. Hey, do you know where NIST.gov is? No, but I'll ask for you. So the port that's opened up, people can come into that. But if someone ever hacks that box, there's no records on it. So that's a lot lower risk, and that's typically called split DNS, design concept known for 15, 20 years. And you can tell anybody we use split DNS, and most people know what you're talking about. I don't hear it called split mail, but why not? The same thing. When I send mail to somebody and they work in my company, that's one thing. But if I got to get mail from outside, opening up port 25 directly from the outside, or if you do it over SSL, it's probably up to the 900 range, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Open it up directly. If someone compromises the box, there's all the mail on it. So we prefer to have an SMTP relay out on the DMZ. And now, be careful, SMTP relays got a bad name, but that's only when they're unauthenticated. That's when you become a spam source. We do like SMTP relays. It's a good thing. So if somebody ever hacks that box, there's no mail on it. We know what spam and phishing are. I don't think I can tell you guys that. Browsing or scavenging attacks. This is a term they use to describe people just nosy, just people looking around. Oh, what's on the shared drive that it's not really my department, but I'll see if I have access to. They go to the printer to get their document. Hey, where's Bob printing? What's this? The fax machine. They look in your trash. They look over your shoulder. These are very common attacks. My daughter is a classic shoulder surfer. The little one, she is so funny. So crazy. She just decides she wants to see what you're doing, but she'll come up and go, "Damn, Daddy," but the eyes are all over the screen. She's already sniffed out Mommy's password. Okay. Business continuity. This is the part that I said my number one failed domain. And it's all about switching to plan B. We accepted risk. We realized we couldn't prevent certain things. For either it just wasn't possible. There's no way to prevent for me right now an asteroid crashing into my house. There's also, it doesn't make sense for me financially to try to prevent certain things. Like I could make my house probably very resistant to broken windows by cementing over it, but it doesn't make sense. So based on your risk, you accept it. You can't prevent. We know we need to detect and respond. Business continuity is how to detect and respond. Disaster recovery is how to detect and respond to mostly what we think of natural disasters and accidents. Incident response is how to respond to malicious attacks, but they're all part of business continuity. I had a boxing trainer tell me that's the most important thing in fighting, that your ability to switch to plan B. Because everybody's got a plan, right? Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until they get punched in the face. Our objective to address the residual risk, to prove that we're not negligent. Negligence when you didn't do anything. We want to keep things continuing. The roles and responsibilities are very similar to what we had before, but we have a business continuity coordinator. It's the manager of this group. They will create some teams. Now, the teams say to recover the IT facility at the alternate site and to rebuild the original site are doing some of the same work. But to decrease cycle time, the time it takes you to go through a life cycle, the only thing we can do is increase bandwidth. And triple constraints. We have scope, what we got to get done. We have time, when it has to get done by, and we have cost. Our objectives here, when we do our requirements, are going to be based in time. They're going to tell us our recovery time objective. The business figures that out. We can't say, no, we'll just take longer. No, we'll have to spend more money. Keep that in mind. And that's why it's probably one of the most overlooked parts of security, because management doesn't want to spend money on something, spend more money than they're supposed to. And if the law doesn't say I have to do it, why would I do it? But there are laws forcing it. And I told you yesterday in logging, and now I want to underscore it again here. There are two parts of our security plan that I find are more driven by law than they are by business requirements. And it's logging, like if you fall under Sarbanes-Oxley, and it's business continuity. If you're a publicly traded company, there's already a bunch of stuff you're supposed to do. The backup facility, well, if my house burns down, I don't have a spare house. Most businesses wouldn't. That would make no sense. To sit there, it's mostly doing nothing. So we generally lease these from a provider. SunGard in Philadelphia is the #1 provider around the world. I believe they still claim something like 70% of the market. They've held that number for about a decade or more. HP, IBM, I think CSC now, but they take up the rest of it, I think. But SunGard, and I've gone to, actually, I went to the Disaster Recovery Institute's class in 2008 with a whole bunch of SunGard folks, as well as a company they picked up right after that, Stroll Systems. My class, there was a bunch of these people, and I don't know if I think it happened so quickly that it couldn't have been based on anything that happened in our class. Stroll Systems, they do disaster recovery, and they returned to what were they doing before? But what's really neat is they, 2008, right after my class. One of the things they did was they buy like a ERP type of system, enterprise resource planning module, that goes, that, for instance, keeping up call trees. So if you recall, I said in my last story there about backup problems, and when I went to request the tape, the authorized guy, the primary guy, it doesn't even work there. Well, that's actually a very, very common problem. Keeping updated call trees are very difficult. Like all of security, when there's no return on investment, management generally doesn't spend too much time on it unless they're forced to. You don't make any money when you're doing a fire drill, right? You don't make up any money when you're maintaining your call trees sometimes. So Stroll Systems will automatically maintain that and push changes down. They recommend you keep an encrypted thumb drive because these plans contain some very sensitive proprietary information. And all you got to do is go to work, plug in your thumb drive, and it'll push down at least the part of the plan that you're responsible for. And most of my people, particularly my DoD guys, could not use that solution because they're not allowed to use USB drives. So most of this stuff is still done on paper in a lot of places. Very difficult. Well, the backup facilities, let's get back to that, from SunGard and stuff, they actually, as far as I know, only want to lease you 3 basic options. You have a hot site, which has all the equipment there, or you have a mirrored site, which has all the equipment and the data is already there. Either of these could also contain end-user facilities. Keep in mind, we're not just looking for alternate data processing facilities. We're looking for alternate end-user facilities. I wanted to get really into this. So in 2008, I took a few classes. I took that. And my favorite organization in this, actually, I did the Disaster Recovery Institute, DRI.org. Yes. I found them very, very, that's not even them. What was Disaster? DRI? I forget. But I found them very long in the tooth. What I liked was BCI. The BCI, that's right. The BCI.org. Oh, I know, it's DRI. I think they're DRI. But this place, now DRI, the Disaster Recovery Institute's out of the United States, and they're considered the granddaddies of this. But BCI is relatively newer, in the early 90s, out of the UK. They work very closely with the British Standards Organization, which works very closely with the ISO. Any ISO guideline standard is likely to be based on the good practice guidelines from these guys. So I love this class. I had a really good class, and I took it with Nat Forbes and Facebook. Let me see. I'm pulling out my Facebook. He's a really good guy. The stats he could quote were just amazing. Where are you, Nat? There he goes, Nathaniel Forbes. Hey, Nat. Watching some boxing in the background. All right. Yeah, this guy, we're going to go through some, actually a good deal of this is based on what I learned in his class. So there we are, Nat. Just a great guy. The numbers he could roll off, you can tell this is all he did. So on a test, they might say the backup facilities could be hot, warm, cold. I only see those. Oh, so Nat Forbes, by the way, he's telling us alternate end user facilities. I take my class in Singapore. He's out of Singapore. What kind of disasters do they worry about most in Singapore? Yes, tsunamis? No, the weather's pretty bad. Earthquakes? No, we don't. Pandemic outbreaks. If you're having a bird flu or some pandemic outbreak, you actually don't want everybody to show up at the alternate site. You prefer that they work from home. So they always have multiple solutions. Most of the world, I find, is much better at this than us. Most people, I think in America, we think, it can happen to us. But most people assume anything can happen at any time. And so they have multiple plans. One is to go to an alternate facility. One is to work from home. But we'll still have to talk about cold and warm. I told you SunGuard doesn't, in my experience, want to sell these. So you might build your own. There's a different reason, very testable reason why you might build your own facility, even a hot or mirrored. The recovery time objective for a given process, say, is 4 hours. And none of the providers have an alternate site 4 hours away from you. You are not going to tell them, hey, how about 6? No, you build your own site. If you do build your own site, and you're going to be maintaining this building, you might as well make it mirrored. You might as well put live data processing in this. It's my experience in the United States, large banks, very concerned with business continuity. It's obvious, it's a requirement. They're legally forced to do this. There's 3 power grids in the United States. East of the Mississippi, west of the Mississippi, and Texas gets the run. Most large banks in the United States tell me they have sites in either one of these. And if anyone, they do like a RAID 5 on their data. If any one site goes down, the other 2 sites can pick up for it. That's pretty cool. Everything looks good on paper, but you need to test the plan. It's like testing your martial arts plan. It ranges all the way from me standing in front of a mirror going, if a guy tried to choke me, I would do this and this and this, and therefore I'd win. I can beat him. But, everything looks good on paper. One of the hardest parts about doing martial arts and sparring, I really hate it. It's like when you're trying to hit the guy, he moves. Now, it's bad enough when they move backwards and I can't reach him. But some of these guys have the audacity to hit you while you're trying to hit them. I'm like, hey, buddy, would you cut it out? Would you stop hitting me? So you learn more in like a sparring than you would just standing in front of a drone by yourself. You learn more trying to actually do a tape restore than you do, drawing it out on paper. Did you restore a test version of the server on a test version? Or did you actually take the primary server offline, actually power it down, bring up the stuff at the alternate site and see if it would really work in the middle of the day? Who wants to do that? I don't do no holds barred fighting. You got to wear gloves. In my rules of engagement, I want 16-ounce gloves, not those 4-ounce UFC gloves. They protect people's knuckles. They don't protect your face much. I don't accept that risk. And you know what? They have bar holds. You cannot bite. You cannot gouge people in the eyes. 2 of my favorite techniques. And if that sounds dirty to you, consider your daughter coming home and saying she was attacked. And you say, what'd you do? I gouged my fingernails right into his eyes, and then I ran. You'd be happy, wouldn't you? Even firemen don't light uncontrolled fires in their fire drills. Most people don't light a fire at all. And that's always my joke. I say, you don't light a fire in a fire drill. And Nat Forbes said, I brought that up in class, and he turned around and he started laughing because you want to hear something funny? I knew a guy, thought it'd be a good idea. And those of you who watched The Office might remember Dwight. It wasn't quite as bad as Dwight. But he said that the guy took a trash can, just took a couple pieces of paper and lit it on fire, and then pulled a fire drill as a manager. And one wise guy jumped over it and knocked it over and started a real fire. No, you don't light fires in your fire drill. So it's not reality. But how much can you test? Whatever's reasonable. You do a risk assessment, but it's my experience, people want to test less than they probably should, and this is why laws force people to do certain things. And the only people I know that are forced, the only market segment I know that are forced to do full interruption tests are banks and parts of the military. All right. I have everything in here in context to the Deming wheel, the PDCA model, and this was actually for a section I was supposed to contribute to a CISSP book. And I was using BCP, business continuity, Greenblatt. Come on, put it out here somewhere. Oh, another C in there. C. Yeah, somewhere in there. Oh, I don't know where it was. But come on, put it out there. Actually, I probably could dig it up. I could put it on your. I want to put it on the share drive. In fact, I think I know where it is. It's an older doc of mine, but I had a student tell me recently, he read it, he said, dude, you got to tell people to read that again. He said, that was the best thing I read. Yeah, it's the best thing I read for my, for the test in general, because of the verbiage I use. So, you know, the truth is, this was written, it's a little dated. It was written, before ISO came out with a guideline, 27031, but I actually talked about it. I knew it was coming out. I thought it was going to come out as a standard. It came out as a, I talked about 20. I thought it was going to come out as an auditable standard. It came out eventually 2011 as a guideline. So unfortunately, you know, it's a little dated there. But other than that, and I've got a bunch of practice questions and stuff. So you might want to take a look at that. Probably should start incorporating that back in the material. All right, so I just do everything in the context of the Deming wheel, and you know, well, you plan, you make your requirements based on, well, we call it first project initiation. We're going to call that policy development. In project initiation, in our development lifecycle, where we get management's goals and the scope, in the context of BCP, we say that's when you set the policy. Functional requirements is when we do the BIA, the business impact analysis. And our major goals are to extract 3 criticality metrics. I have 4 here because 2 of them are related. To the business process, we say, what's the longest you can afford to be without this process? And maybe they say 4 hours. But it could be a half hour before we even noticed we had a problem. And it could take another half hour to get everybody out of the building before we even think about doing recovery. We need to account for life safety and stuff. So the recovery time objective, the RTO, has to be less than the MTD. MTD is to the business. RTO is our technical plan. How long do we think it's going to take us to build a facility? I like to use the analogy of getting in a car, getting a flat in a car. The MTD, I could afford to be off the road for whatever, an hour. But it took me 15 minutes to be able to pull over to the side of the road safely. So it's going to, I got 45 minutes to get that tire on. Everybody make sense to everybody? I keep stressing the most commonly failed domains, so I just want to make sure that everybody gets this one clear. Give me some TCPX. The recovery time objective must be less than the MTD. Nobody's understanding. Nobody can hear me. Darn it. Why doesn't somebody let me know that? Somebody should be calling me on the phone. Larry, your computer's not working. Oh, okay. Well, you guys, I was asking you to tell me, did you understand that the MTD or the RTO has to be shorter than the MTD? You have to allow time for crisis management. Don't get lazy on me. All right, writing notes. The RPO, good one to write a note about then. How far back in time must you make it look? Yeah, I understood. Recovery point objective says, I got to go back to this point. So again, in a bank, don't tell me you went back to the point of last night's backup. Recovery point objectives change for various data items. If I treated everything like you can't lose it, then I got to mirror all of my data, and that's expensive. So here's an example. We'll say high criticality must be mirrored, medium criticality must be from last night's backup, and low criticality is 24 hours or longer. Then we do it. Minimum operating requirements, which may be the most overlooked thing. Now that's a newer term. A lot of people focused on service level objectives. Right? So I got to be able to print whatever 20 pages per minute. You get a printer that can do that. And it's set up. And then you get a call from the department. Hey, we can't print. Oh, no, dude, I got the right printer, and I know I can ping the printer from here. Yeah, we can ping it too. There's no paper in that printer. People forget supplies. So minimum operating requirements, MOR, includes services and supplies. And one other statement on that. We're going to talk more about this, but I just want you to consider this. You do a BIA. You do a BIA for the sales department. How many people do you normally have here on the phone? What are your minimum operating? Well, we have 10 people on the phone, so we need minimally, normal service levels, we have 10. I'm sorry. We have, that's 10 phones, 10 computers, 2 printers, blah, 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 2 fax machines. Okay, and if it was an emergency, bare minimum. Oh, we'd need at least 5. Okay, good. That didn't just tell me at the alternate site I only have to get 5 for them. It also could be a situation where customer service goes down. It's an emergency. Hey guys, in sales department, you told me in an emergency you only need 5. Guess what? It's an emergency. We need these customer service are going to take over 5 of your machines. Again, don't just think alternate data processing. Think alternate data user facilities. All right, so then you do it. You create standards and procedures. You make offsite contract agreements. You create test plans, right? You create plans in case there's an emergency, and we generally think of life safety stuff, right? Crisis management. Recovery, that's how to get you up and running at the alternate site, how to put on a spare tire. Reconstitution, how to go shop for the proper tire to repair or replace your original one. And then training, so people know how to do this. You're going to architect training programs. And then you check. You'll audit. Have an outsider come in. Let me see where you guys are on your part of the plan. You're a SQL DBA. That's part of your job description. You should keep that up. You exercise people. You test the plan. And I don't care if it's a real emergency or there's a test, there are going to be problems. Every time I spar, I get hit. And you do a gap analysis. So you do improve the plan. All right, so again, we said this. Business continuity is everything. It deals with the 2 IT-related functions. We think of disaster, accidents, and natural disasters, incident management, malicious stuff. Emergency or crisis management, we're dealing with life safety issues. That's not really us. When there's a fire, our first thought is not data. It's get people out of the building and account for that. Make sure we know. We don't want to send firemen into a burning building, right? And business resumption, how do I gain back customer confidence? These are not things that we're going to worry too much. We're focused on the top 2 bullets. There's no international standard. That's what I was hoping 27031 was going to be. And unfortunately, think of it this think over any recent disaster and think about the response. And could it have gone better? Well, as you know, we have 2 organizations in the United States dealing with guidelines here. 3, really. We have NAFPA, the National Fire Protection Agency, but we have NIST and we have FEMA. And talk about damage to reputation being one of your worst losses. After Katrina, it seems like FEMA doesn't get any respect. And yet I'm FEMA certified for just basic business continuity. But actually they call it COOP, Continuity of Operations Planning. I find their stuff great. I love FEMA's guidelines. They make the most sense to me out of all these guys. But because it damages reputation, FEMA and NIST don't even see eye to eye. And they're 2 U.S. agencies. If I can't get 2 U.S. agencies seeing eye to eye, no wonder there's problems with disasters around the world. But we'll get it better. We're aware of this. We'll make the future a better place. We're Jedi Knights. All right, the DRII, there it is, DRII.org. They have their own life cycle. No feasibility. It's security. You got to do it. Project initiation, set the policy. Functional requirements, do the business impact analysis. They have design and develop in one phase. Usually that's 2 different phases. I'm not going to worry about it. You implement it in a series of contracts and plans and stuff like that. You test it. You test the technology, see if it works. You exercise your people. You're going to maintain it. There's always changes in law, in staff, in technology, in business environment, in threat environment. And I hope it doesn't happen, but I might have to execute that plan. And I've used this analogy a few times. I love this guy. And I actually stole this from one of the authors of BS 25999. That's what ISO 27031 is a guideline. BS 25999 is the auditable standard it was based on. Actually, 25777 and 9 together. Anyway, so emergency management, if I get a flat, is getting to the side of the road. Again, when you drive on a flat, you're a risk not just to yourself, but to other people on the road. It's negligent of you to try and drive. You got to get over the side of the road. Then you do a damage assessment. And maybe you didn't have to. Maybe it was just a bumpy road. But one way you're going to figure out, no, I got to change the tire. All right, then you use the emergency tire. That's recovery. Recovery gets you up to some acceptable level. As long as that tire can do 55, I should be okay. Reconstitute is to get the original tire replaced and repaired. Reconstitute means to return to normal. Recovery. It was covered. Who's covering the phones? We need to recover. You're going to do it again. It's not the same as reconstitute. And resumption, get back to recovery, whatever is acceptable. There's a section in 27001, the objective to counteract interruptions to business activities and protect business processes or effectual major failures of information systems disasters and to ensure their timely resumption. Sorry, I didn't mean to click there. I like 834. It has from this. It's a very nice document. I don't agree with everything. And for instance, right here, I do agree those 2 blue things are the IT-related functions. That's what I've been finding. I don't agree that COOP should be called a subset of business continuity planning because FEMA and most of my DoD guys use COOP to describe the overall process. So I don't agree with that. What is a disaster? Depends on what you consider a disaster. DRI says it's sudden, your inability to conduct business results in great damage. But when I'm taking a CISSP test or any IT test and I see disaster, my immediate thought is I need to leave the facility. I would keep that in mind. And we want to have a plan ahead of time so we mitigate any negative effects to life safety, our reputation, and everything else really falls under reputation. NIST has their own 7-step process. You develop the policy. Yeah, that's the project initiation. Conduct a BIA. We do our requirements. Identify preventive controls. I would have expected we did that already, but whatever. Develop recovery strategies. Where will we go? How long should it take? Develop the plan that meets that strategy. Test the plan. Train your people. Maintain it. And good thing they don't have that ugly section where you execute the plan. I don't want to go through that. 3 basic phases, though. First, you find out about it. And that call could be at 3 in the morning, someone says your building's on fire. And when you get a call or anybody tells you have an incident, doesn't mean you're actually having an incident. They could be technically wrong. They just misunderstood what they thought they saw. Or they could be out and out lying. So whenever you are notified that something's going wrong, confirm the incident. Do a damage assessment. How bad is it? You need to meet. You're going to have recovery personnel, and guess where you won't meet? At the building that may be burning down. So it's best practice to have 2 off-site emergency operation centers. The recovery phase, getting the spare tire on, reconstitution, getting the original one. Now, these could happen at the same time. Remember, when you're recovered with a spare tire and you got it on, the emergency is not over. You don't have another spare, and it's very likely this doesn't give you the same service levels. So please know that on the test, you are not out of the emergency until you have fully reconstituted. That means you go back to your primary site, or if that was destroyed, you get a new one. But you're not staying at SunGuard forever. In fact, they have in their service level agreement default time frame of 30 days. And a couple people tell me they found out on like day 28. You know you guys are out of here in 2 days, right? No? Yep. All right. We talked about MTD, RTO, RPO. Service deliverable objectives may show up because it should be minimum operating requirements today, which includes service levels and supplies. But not a lot of people still use it. I still see some things about service levels. Sometimes I still SLO, service level objective. You know, without an international standard, there's no one place to call this one thing. Now, something that I don't see in tests, but I want you to consider. You can't drive on a donut tire forever. What is your maximum time in alternate operations? Most people ignore that in my experience. What about the interdependencies? Again, it's hard to bring up. We're going to prioritize which business process comes up first. We're going to bring up customer service first. But what will they do without phones? So we have to identify, oh no, they're going to need phones too. Yeah. We need to get them up. All right, I mentioned backlog transactions before. Just think about it again. Imagine you go to the department store, probably all seen this, where the credit card processor's down and they pull out that old imprint reader and they get the imprint of your card. You know, when they get the server back up, someone's got to take, you know, that day or whatever's worth of transactions and commit these. The hardest part in any of these plans, people who work with us tell me all the time, it's people issues. People don't respond in a disaster the way they do in a test. Some people come alive, some people fall apart. Bob was great on the test. You got him the best fire extinguisher in the world, and he really knew how to do it. But in the real fire, when Alice's flesh was melting in front of him, he just froze. By the way, as martial artists, I want to tell you something about survival skills. People always tell you you've got to fight or flee. Neither of those are very popular, actually. Most people do not do either. You freeze. You see a bear in front of you, fighting isn't a good idea, and running away isn't either. Freeze is way more common, but most people think it's fight or flee, it's fight or flee. Nah, you got a third option that most people will do. And of course, our impact of legal and regulatory requirements. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about notification later on when we do after incident response. Same thing. You got to let people know. And you want them to hear from you, not your competitor, any problem you have. And, you know, just because there was a fire doesn't mean you can leak secrets. So we do a BIA to establish the essential people, the technologies, right? All the key infrastructure, all the key data. Senior management is ultimately accountable for everything. Departmental manager, they give us their requirements, right? Same as our risk management phase. The BCP committee, which I find is usually one guy who's the business continuity coordinator and a bunch of dotted lines to people from process owners from different departments. But whatever, we're not going to worry about that. We'll just say there's a team, steering committee. The team, well, we're not probably involved in the emergency crisis management. That's going to be HR type of stuff, making sure people are out of the building. But we might get called in for one thing here, doing that last hit the red button so the servers are powered down. Yeah, that is something. Make sure that you at least power it down. We want the emergency power off. Now, whether it's an emergency, a test or a real problem, you're not going to remember all the things you did. So it's best practice to have independent observers document what they see going on. And that can help in your gap analysis. Say, well, I noticed it took an hour and 45 minutes before Bob even found the proper phone number to call for such and such. Was it that long? I thought it was like 15 minutes. It was an hour and 45 minutes. Old laws don't memorize them, requiring that you do this. But if people aren't held accountable for the law and they don't enforce it, people don't take it seriously. These are things you can light before management. Go, boss, we can get sued. But they're going to want to say, show me another guy that's been sued like that. Senior management appoints the members of the committee, and again, we want departmental representation. Senior management, always ultimately accountable. Every business process thinks they're the most critical. So senior manager says, nah, we're going to bring this process up. They approve the plan. They go over test results. They ensure that it's kept up to date. They should fund it. The team does the more specific compliance requirements with the BIA. They develop the plans and procedures. They develop the teams, at least for recovery and salvage. They provide training and lead drills. What if Bob's unavailable? You know, the only person, anybody can pull the fire extinguisher, declare an emergency, and everybody needs to leave the facility. But that doesn't mean you're going to go to the alternate site. You pay a certain amount of money for them to retain a site. You pay a lot more money to move in because they're allowed to overbook up to 40 to 1. Assuming not everybody's going to have the same disaster at the same time, but if they did. On a test, first declaration. That's called a declaration. You call them and you go, I declare a disaster. And that bill goes up. Well, I don't want just anybody being able to do that. Only the business continuity coordinator has the authority to make that call. He died in the fire. Ooh. So you always have at least 2 alternates. They are named in a succession plan. Who will succeed this person? Where there's buildings unavailable, facilities unavailable. What is the region of the country? What if I can't get equipment? What if I can't get out supplies? What if my vendor goes belly up? What if there's no power? What if there's no heat? No electricity? And once you get it right, there's changes. The more, I need a copy of the plan somewhere besides the server that's burning down. So it's very testable that you have a full-scale copy at the alternate site. But what about for what I'm going to do, my part of the role? So I'm not allowed to use encrypted thumb drives. So I got these paper documents. The more versions of the document you have, the better for availability, but a lot harder to control the version. Because if management doesn't care, you won't get funded. No bucks, no Buck Rogers. So management makes it part of standard business practice. You keep up within your job descriptions and people evaluate you, and you have internal audits and regular drills. This is from my class. One of the guys let me take a picture. These things fold up and fit in their wallet. Everybody had something like this. It's amazing. Like I said, people over there are much more prepared than most of my guys over here. And there's a lot of other stuff on the other page too. I just put that in there. Where will you go? All right, cold sites, no equipment. Hot site, fully equipped. Guess what a warm has? Some. You're going to get the equipment that's hard to get a hold of in an emergency. Mirrored site, fully equipped with data. All right, so let's go over supposedly ISC square numbers. Cold site could take a week or more to be operational. A warm site is up within a week. A hot site is up within 24 hours. A mirrored site never lost, right? State can continue to work. Now, you can be fully mirrored or partially mirrored, like the banks. Right? Somebody in my near future will look for a place with the shortest recovery time and recovery point objectives. I go for full mirrored. A mobile site, sometimes called rolling hot. They're rarely hot. They're typically warm at best, but they're data centers on wheels. And there's a couple advantages. Maybe I have an issue. There was a flood in the data center, but the lines going into it were good. Maybe I could just plug those lines. This way I don't have to wait for DNS to replicate and go over to someone else's site because I changed IP settings. Here I could keep everything. There's another thing. I could probably drive anywhere in Pennsylvania in 10 hours. And if I had a recovery time objective of 5 hours, I could put a mobile site in the middle of the state and service multiple locations. Reciprocal agreement, as they call it on this test, mutual aid and FEMA and stuff. These are, when I read it in a CISSP book, it sounds to me like they're saying, Schick made an agreement with Gillette, and they could use some of their space, and if they had a problem, Gillette said Schick could do it. I don't think that would ever work. Where I get is usually different departments in the same organization. So, for example, I've taught CISM a lot at the National Institute of Health, and there's 29 divisions at NIH, and every division is a mutual aid partner for every other division. And even they said, I doubt it would work. On your test, reciprocal agreements can save you money. They're inexpensive. But they may not work, so do not put all your eggs in that basket. So it's like, hey guys, can we move in today? No, we got auditors coming in today. Could you have your emergency tomorrow? Never mind, we'll go to SideGuard. That's okay. But if you, dude, we're stuck. We put everything in there now. All right, software backup. We talked about a little story here, so we know the difference between incremental, differential, and full. You want tapes offsite in case the building burns down. And I could have data sent offsite, tapes, but again, if I have a recovery point objective of less than 24 hours, that doesn't work. All right, electronic vaulting and journaling, so far of all I heard they ask about on the test. These look at files. In a vault, the least expensive solution here, you look at the archive bit. Is it a new file? Copy it to the other side. Not all at once, not in real time. We'll do it, say, every hour, every whatever. All right, so in a batch process, it copies new files. Well, my 32 terabyte mail store changes every time I send or receive an email. I don't want to copy that over every hour. So for large databases, they prefer journaling. And we know how databases write things. We just said it. You write things to a log file, and the log file is committed. Well, I'll do a double commit. I'll commit it to 2 different locations. Awesome. But most of my guys tell me we're not doing this. I don't care about the file. I'm just going to look at the disk itself. I'm going to look at every block of disk, and I'm going to make a MD5 hash or an SSH hash. And if this is a new hash, that block of data changed. I'm just going to copy that block over. That's a lot smarter. Remote journaling is described as only copying the changes, but that's only what it knows on that database file. Block level mirroring copies only the changes for everything. I haven't heard that they ask about block level mirroring, but maybe the new test will. Now, shadowing is not a remote solution. When I came up shadowing, I didn't think of it this way. To back up a database file that's open, you can't because it's open. I can't confidently back it up. So when we were doing our backups, when I do Cheyenne or backup exec, you get an agent, the agent for Exchange, the agent for SQL, and it makes a shadow copy of the file. It makes it a mirror copy. But that copy's there, in my mind, was there so I can run backups against that. What I didn't consider, I've had DBAs tell me later, dude, you should have shadowed to a different physical disk. That way, if you had a disk crash, that shadow it's right there. It's up to that point. So that would have been but that's not a remote solution. Shadowing is only for local. All right, you send your tapes off-site. How did you get the data there? Choice Point thought it'd be a good idea to use UPS. Turned out to be a bad idea. They lost thousands of records. Can you get there 7 by 24? Well, I was able to get to Iron Mountain. That was cool. How secure is their facility outside of DoD? I'm not seeing a lot of people yet encrypting their data backups. Most of the private sector, in my experience, they are starting to encrypt their laptops. But other than that, they mostly encrypt data in transit, not at rest. That's a key management problem. It's tough. It's going to affect availability when you're trying to do the restore. Recovery teams and salvage teams do the same thing. Salvage teams are the guys who bring you back to normal. Some people call them, silly old FEMA, they call them reconstitution teams. That makes too much sense. I don't know. They're typically called salvage teams. All right, a drill is a test for the technology, but it's an exercise for the people who run it. So it'll train them, and it'll also identify problems with your plan. Right? You do the fire drill, and you realize we time it, and you go, this isn't going to work. That was one of the things Nat Forbes could quote was so great. So the guys in my class says, how long does it take to vacate a premises? And I'm like, man, that's got to be, and as I'm thinking, so debatable. He goes, 5 seconds per person per exit door. How many people in your building? And then he even knew, he goes, wait a minute, you're Royal Bank of Scotland, aren't you? He goes, yeah. You down on such and such street? And he goes, yeah, I know that facility. You've got about 400 people there. Actually, by code, you need 2 exit doors. But you said your boss, that parent company actually will always double that. He said, so they have 4 emergency exit doors. So you could have 400 people anytime. That he gave us the number pretty quickly. Amazing. The benefits of testing, assurance that the plan would work. There's no confidence in an untested plan. Everything looks good on paper. Right? It trains people. It ensures that it's kept up to date. Heck, I failed this week. What happened? What was different? Oh, they updated the file system, blah, 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 and that changed it. And when something goes wrong in a test, everybody starts talking about it. It's increased awareness, even if you're making fun of people. But no test is the real thing. And you're not making any money during your tests, so you want to set the appropriate levels of tests. You keep it as simple as possible. If the laws say you only have to do this, you probably only want to do that, unless you know for a business case you need to do more. 5 basic tests. The checklist tests, paper-based only. This one is when a manager goes over it by himself. This is me pretending to go through a martial art technique by myself. Get these managers in a meeting. Still paper-based, but I might identify interdependency. Hold on, dude, I don't think that would work. You can't bring up customer service without phones. Oh, yeah. It's hard to schedule meetings. Marco left, I think, just as I was becoming a manager. That's when he knew the place was going downhill. When made me a manager, Marco's like, that's it. It's time for me to go. But the funny thing, when I became a manager, I realized I wanted to schedule meetings, and nobody cared about my meetings outside my group. I'm like, oh, this is stupid. And you had to increase. No, really, coordinating. Probably not the reason. No, I know. I believe you had a very awesome offer with. Plus, that place was going down. We left in time because they became ARC. Everything, they sold that place out, but that was going down anyway. You just had good eyes, and you had a great opportunity with Terry. I remember. Simulation tests. I'm going to try really simulate this on test hardware in a test environment, and this lets me know that the technically this works. This is probably as far as I really want to go. I've actually never been required to do anything beyond this, but I know some places are. Right. Parallel test, I'm going to try it with, I hate to do this. I'm actually going to shut down Exchange. Not everything, but I'm going to test mail. I don't think most organizations want to shut down their mail for a test. I don't care how long it is. So a lot of people do something like this. You have a mirroring technology. Bob goes to the alternate site. Alice stays at her desk. And then during the test, someone sends a mail to Alice. Bob, did you see it too? Yes. Bob, you type a message. Alice, did you see the message he saw? Yes. That's a lot safer than bringing down mail. But it's still touching production. If there's something that Bob does that might bring down the server, it's risky. In the simulation test, you never touch production. So I don't like to do this, but that would be the safest way to do something like this. But banks and military are required to do this. Not all military, but a good deal of it. You have to all shut down everything and prove that you can reconstitute at the other side, or you can recover at the alternate site, run some data, and then prove that you can bring it back up at the primary site, reconstitute. I told you that's what Terry told me they were doing, Marco. As of 2012, he said we just finished it. First time they were able to test reconstituting. All right, common problems. Our tape's got to go away. For the sake of data restores, man, I can't stand it. Sometimes I need the exact same tape drive that read it to write it. And there's also, all right, imagine you're Coca-Cola. You go over to SunGuard. Everything worked. Hey, I'll buy the pizza. I can't believe it. Well, let's party. Again, it's a shared site. Did you securely clean everything from the alternate site? So then Pepsi goes in to do a test. Hey, boss, look what I just found on the servers. And then you got your techs who mean well. Hey, we were supposed to test mail. That worked. You know what? Fax servers plug into mail. Let's test that while we're here. Keep it simple, stupid, the KISS principle. The results of the test is part of risk management. We're checking so we can act, so we can improve the plan. Our number one priority we know is life safety. We have to learn CPR. Right? We need to evacuate the premises and account. And it's tough. I forget, I'm sorry if I say things, but I forget because I teach it so much. But in 9/11, it was not easy for everybody to let everyone know they're out. What are you going to do? Meet an emergency rendezvous point? Are you going to call somebody? So we do our best. It's not perfect. And that buzz is a guy mowing his lawn, not the sweet birds. By the way, while we were talking, somebody was telling, I didn't want to interrupt, a beautiful blue jay landed on my porch roof, which is about 2 feet from this window, and it stayed out there for really cool. All right, we're going to test like all of our risk activities at least once a year or after a significant change, and to limit scope creep. We have a predetermined, let's just imagine there was a fire in customer service. Other response issues, and we'll deal with this in the next module section as well, incident response. But you got to contact emergency services, police, fire, medical. You got to notify your business customers, insurance, service provider. And why were they surprised that people were looting in Katrina? That was silly to me. I was surprised more in Japan that they weren't vandalizing things. People are going to do stuff. And fraud, come on, insurance. My mom used to tell me that a SEPTA bus in Philadelphia holds 200 people. But if there's an accident, there's an average of 200 claims. All right. Good time to take our last break. And this takes me, when I had to cover the laws, it took me about an hour. So I'm expecting that this is only going to take me 40 minutes or so at best. Everybody go take a break, come back in 15 minutes and hopefully knock this out, but I'd say by 2:30. Is that good? Okay, good. Okay, I told you it's an English test, and your command of the English language will go a long way. And what does the word mean from the Greek or the Latin? But incident doesn't work that way. Incident just means a point in time. It is some kind of, gentle way to say we had a crisis or a big problem, but they don't want to say that. So they just, we had an incident. And could you be more specific? Let's just say we had an event. When I read incident on my IT test, I assume something malicious. Either an internal person did something they shouldn't be doing, or an external. It could be a virus outbreak. It could be inappropriate usage. Most of my incident handling comes, right out of 861. And the basic processes, you're prepared because you know this can happen. That's why you have a team. That's why they have policies. That's why there's procedures and tools. Then you detect the problem. We know whenever we detect a problem, we know our detection mechanisms, whether human or technology, could be wrong. So we always confirm the incident, do an impact analysis. How bad is it? You do triage, right? You have very limited resources. You can't treat everything like an emergency. Then you take your containment measures, and containment measures will depend on the type of machine and the type of attack. It might be pull the power cable, it might be pull the network cable, it might be pull the battery. Eradicate, you removed it. If it was a virus, you scrubbed it. If it was a rootkit, you wiped the machine and started over. And you recover. You get the system working again so the users can get back to work and back to business continuity. Then you determine what happened. In your post-incident review, you go back and determine the root cause. And you're going to take corrective and recovery controls. So again, if somebody broke in because you were setting up clear text passwords and they sniffed it out and they deleted a database, well, you're going to address the root cause. You're going to start encrypting passwords. You're going to get the database back, and you're going to try and track that person down and stop them, maybe hold them accountable. All right? Hopefully hold them accountable. And now you're better prepared. So this is a life cycle. Now that you're encrypting, you are better prepared. Oh, let me just go back because I think I said it, but I just want to underscore it. I've heard that if you get the heavy incident management tests, there's like a dozen questions that are scenario-based that you detect a problem, and 3 of the answers are containment measures. And the other one says document and analyze your findings, and that's the answer. Don't shoot before you aim. Even if it's a split-second decision, you aim first. There's a goal in 27001 that you report information security events and weaknesses. And people might not report it because it's a damage to their reputation, but they might not report it because they didn't recognize it. So if you're getting more reports, remember that could mean that your people are better educated and they noticed it. Your awareness programs are working. And management of improvement security incidents and improvements. So why does this keep happening to you? Why don't you learn to encrypt passwords? Why doesn't Microsoft learn to solve passwords locally? That's a separate thing, but they don't. They don't assault their. If your password's Eagle and my password's Eagle on a Microsoft system, you're going to get the same hash. You know what? My show put the test. Let me digress for a second. Did everybody catch that? If my password is Eagle 123, and your password is Eagle 123, the hash stored on the local machine is the same. Well, that sucks. No, wait a second. That not only tells me that if I crack one password, I might get multiple. But what's your password policy? 8 characters? 10 characters? Couldn't I just create a database of every possible 8-character password and hash it and get that hash? And what is that called? I bet you Felipe knows what that's called. What are those databases of every possible Microsoft hash? And who else was just vulnerable to that? When 2-3 years ago, LinkedIn got all their passwords hacked, and they stole the hash database. That's what they do. They take the hash file. In Microsoft, it's called the SAM database. It's called the rainbow tables. The rainbow tables are pre-computed hash values. Linux isn't vulnerable to rainbow attacks. Because when you create, if my password's equal and your password's equal, we don't get the same hash. Linux is going to go, all right, his password's equal, let's grab some other values. And it could be his full name. Also, the time and date of the creation, and we'll also salt it with the groups he's a member of. Something like that. And they salt their passwords. And I said something like that. Because way outside the scope of this class is what the top hacker people like NSA guys have to do. And it is called salt guessing. What did they salt the password with? But that's way outside of it. All right, we need to understand how to deal with incidents, how to treat it as business continuity. We're not out there trying to catch bad guys. That's not our goal. Our goal is to keep the business running. I often tease security people. I say, you hire a security guy, and you say, look, there's something weird. Our applications are performing weird. And he's going to start sniffing around for bad guys. And if you look for bad guys, you will find them. And he's going to go, here's Bob in accounting doing some inappropriate usage. Okay, it's still acting slow. Oh, I don't know. You hire someone like Laura Chappell or Hansan Bay or Megumi Takshita, you get a Wireshark analyst in there. They're going to find, it's slow because of a client problem, a network problem, a server problem. Maybe it was a bad guy. Maybe they actually did find a hacker, whatever. At the end of it, try the app now. That's much better. And that's what's more important. And they know that in this test. We're trying to just keep business running. All right. We have to understand evidence. That's the types of evidence from, expert testimony. I have an opinion to here's a signed copy of the receipt. I have, direct evidence from a witness's, I saw it. I have a photograph. It's conclusive. I have all these different things. I have paper records. I have documentary evidence. By the way, let me plant a seed. Most evidence in most cases is documentation. Even in a murder case. Here's the receipt for the gun. Here's a printout of his phone records. It's a lot of evidence is paper, and we need to validate it. And that's what we're mostly concerned with here. We have to understand the life cycle of evidence. From the time your forensics analyst first acquired it, or incident handler first acquired that evidence, to the time you present it in court, you have to have a documented chain of custody. If they can ever find a point where, wait a minute, what happened to the evidence here? Where was it? Not really sure. Well, then forget that. This evidence is incompetent. If you get beat up on this, I hear there's a half dozen questions on chain of custody. The ethics we covered, and the bottom line is to protect everybody. That's what I think. I love working with the Marines. They might be one of my probably my favorite customer. I just got word I'm going back to Quantico in a couple of weeks. I'm really excited. And it's just, probably because Joe Lewis is a Marine. But I just love it. And a lot of my Marines, the older guys, not even my IT guys, the guys in my neighborhood, they go, kill them all and let God sort them out. I don't go by that. I go the other way. I say, protect everybody and let God sort them out. If I accidentally protected a Hitler or whatever, well, then you know what? I'm sure his karma will catch up with him. But I'd much rather do that than hurt an innocent person. That's just my bent on it, and I think that's the best way to handle it. We have a wonderful road. I love the internet, but we have to share it. And I know sharing slows me down. When I was driving and I come up to a red light and I had to stop because of some other guy. But it's the only way. It's only fair. Motivations and profiles of attackers might be fun to study on your own, but they are not really testable. Kevin Mitnick, I just wanted to see if he could get in. He was a joyrider. Robert Morris was just trying an experiment. He was just negligent in his experiment. But they're robbing banks, as my mom said. They want your money. And we've seen a lot of the government, espionage, military espionage. Sure, the United States is behind a lot of it. I've been for years pointing fingers at China and how bad they've been, but our answer was to be just as bad or worse. I don't know. One thing, when we do pick on the NSA, I like to keep it in balance. I do believe they're making a lot of technical bad decisions. They base too much on confidentiality and not enough on availability. But at the same time, we're reading about them and we can debate them, and I can watch us talk about it on the Daily Show. You think they're not doing it in China? You think Putin doesn't have a similar program? You think any Chinese TV show is allowed to talk about that? So I want to keep that in perspective. If I pick on the NSA, it's not like I think China is any different. The only difference is they're not allowed to talk about it. In fact, when I was in Singapore, that was one of the things they brought up. We had to learn about disasters, that things that could be technically a disaster. And one of the things says a strike. You know, if a company goes on strike, or, you know, some of your provider, or whatever. And people are like, huh? I was the only guy from the States besides the teacher. And that goes, no, you're from the States. And yeah, he goes, tell them how a strike can shut down your business. I said, you guys don't go on strike here? He goes, no, they do. They go on strike here. After business hours, they're allowed to go on strike. You will never pick up a Singapore newspaper and see a single contradictory word against their government. You won't see anything. Nobody says anything bad about Singapore in my experience, other than foreigners. My cab drivers who are from Malaysia. They're the only ones who bitch about it. Our incident handling procedures, investigation, these are the testable things we want to focus on. Now, hearsay is when evidence can't be backed up. For instance, very basic concept here. If I say I'm in trial and Marco's accused of doing something, and I say to the judge, hey, Your Honor, there's no way Marco could have committed that crime because he was at a ball game with me at that time. I could be lying, but they have to listen to me and consider my testimony. But if I go, hey, there ain't no way Marco could have done that because he was with my boy. My boy said that he was with him. Well, where's your boy? So basically it's when it's he said, she said type kind of thing. It extended out into information when, was that the original contract or is that a photocopy of the contract? And so now a photocopy becomes hearsay. Yeah, you could have doctored that image. So basically we think of copies. Cannot be. What is computer-generated evidence? You actually had attorneys arguing, Your Honor, I don't believe we can trust this printout because the evidence would literally be in a series of ones and zeros stored in a silicon wafer inside a computer. What we're looking at is actually a copy of what was in the memory of that computer, and I don't know, with all the device drivers and everything else in the middle, that we can actually count on that. Something as simple as a cable could have changed the data. And there was a case, and I believe the precedence was Rosenberg versus Collins, inappropriate usage case, guy going out to whatever, porn sites or something, and they used the log to prove that he'd been doing this. Now, that type of evidence, you sure a cable's going to change this? I don't think so. A cable problem is going to tell him that he went to a porn site. No. All right, so that's it. But can you show me that you didn't tamper the log? Aren't these read-write text files? Go to our provider, our archive, our tape archive company, I think it was Iron Mountain, and request tapes that we ourselves haven't seen yet and see if that data is on those tapes. You're not allowed to target people, you know. Did you only log Bob? No, we log everybody. Did you only log the week you wanted to get Bob? We log during normal course of business. You can see it in our stated policies. That held up. So computer-generated evidence met the business exemption to the hearsay rule. You can use computer-generated, these so-called copies, but they just come under a lot of scrutiny, that's all. And that's why we would like to digitally sign them or possibly log to write once media. Or talk about the difference between enticement and entrapment. You know, one is ethical, one's not. It's a question of intent. Enticement's fine. They intended to commit a crime. Types of incidents, we talk about denial of service, malicious code, unauthorized access, inappropriate usage. Beat that up. Military and intelligence gathering, we see it all the time. Stuxnet. Financial attacks. Zeus robbing banks. My favorite business competitive intelligence case. And I can't find it, so now I wonder if it wasn't The Onion I read and I fell for it. Schick versus Gillette. Schick catches a guy emailing information to Gillette about their super secret project. And Upon further investigation, this guy was a Gillette employee. He took the job at Schick just to do corporate espionage. And my favorite part of the case was he discovered the Quattro. You needed a spy? You didn't see that coming? Like, we had one blade, we had gone to 2. Gillette, currently at 3. Smithers, I want you to get over there and see what those guys are up to. Boss, I hope you're sitting down. Really? You needed a spy? And Gillette actually answers with a 5-blade system. Incredible. I want to leapfrog that. I'm going to recreate the largest number of blades before infinity, dodecaphonic thing, and it's going to charge $1 million a cartridge. I just got to sell a couple of these. Now, I really believe 1 blade's enough. I see that guy in the commercial. Why did your barber only use 1 blade? Because it's enough. They clean easier. Terrorist attacks, whatever. I don't think I have to explain what that is. It's not just kids anymore. When I started teaching this, we mostly taught it, unruly kids, but now it's organized crime, state-sponsored. Operational issues. People will put lunch meat in a CD-ROM drive, and it's disgusting. It's a salami. No, I'm sorry. Salami is an old accounting concept that they siphon off fractions of a cent. And, you're just a series of smaller crimes in the hopes of a larger crime not being noticed. So Richard Pryor in Superman 3, and most people's techie favorite, Office Space, where he missed a few decimal points. Data diddling. This is altering the data before they input it or after the output. I say this about car dealers and mortgage companies. There's always extra stuff on these contracts that I did not agree to, and I wind up arguing with people. I have a combination, by the way, salami data diddling fear. Kim, this is one of the first things when your brother was in my class, he said, I changed his life on this statement. It's just a little dopey thing. When I go to the gas station and I pay at the pump, and it says, would you like a receipt? I'm always worried in the back it says, if no, add 10 cents. So I always get a receipt, though I intend to throw it out. I don't know. Could happen. It's from being in the neighborhood. Excessive privileges. We give people more rights than they need to. Marco, during a break, was telling me I was fighting this, trying to, tell people you don't need all these privileges. Sniffing. I can't tell if my users are sniffing. It's a passive attack. In order for a sniffer to work, I hope I did cover this for people. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure I cover this because I know it shows up on every test. I did it on a break, but I don't think I said it. In order for my network card only processes information sent to my MAC address, or if it's a broadcast or a multicast. So if I want to sniff all the traffic that I can see, meaning if I'm on a hub or the old shared bus Ethernet or in a Wi-Fi, we're all in the same radio waves or whatever, then I set my card to be in promiscuous mode. There are promiscuous mode detectors. I say to you, hey, are you running promiscuous mode? And if you're polite, you go, yeah, but that's not a guarantee. In Ethernet, they cut the cable. There are other things I'm running in monitor mode I'm not going to ask you. No, I'm not even going to tell you. That's for me to know and you to find out. So be careful. That's one of those operators. And a lot of your operators have these tools. Dumpster diving. People just go through your trash. And I had red team guys that did this. And they said, we like to call that waste archaeology. Most of the time, we don't catch hackers. It's often they're not even in this country. And you have a responsibility. If they came in because you didn't patch yourself a year ago, you might be found negligent. And if they use you to get to another one of your business-to-business networks, they can really hold you to a high level of accountability. Those are known as downstream liabilities. Now, to show negligence, when there's a negligence case, you have to show that somebody failed to do what they were supposed to do, whether expressed by law or if it's because any reasonable person or similar organizations were all doing that, and approximately how much damage was done due to their negligence. So if you're not supposed to bring a space heater to work, and you do, and nothing goes wrong, you can get off with a warning. But that same action could end you in jail if it started a fire and people died. Same action. That's proximate causation. When you investigate, you have to gather evidence. People don't report crimes because it's a damage to their reputation or because they didn't realize it. So we want to definitely make sure people feel that they should be able to be good detectives and identify stuff. Now, the incident response team, senior management, ultimately accountable. The incident manager heads this process. Incident handler and forensics analysts are the two primary roles under the incident manager. Incident handlers are the first responders from incident response. Their job is to acquire the evidence and to maintain chain of custody. This is what that kid, my martial arts student, Aaron, does. He started out. He was there. Do I have his, because he just got a really good raise. I'm very proud of him. Aaron, come on, Aaron, what'd you do? What's your role now? He's now an analyst, though. Senior forensics analyst, yes. I call this guy my Gran Torino, because he really had nothing. He had 9th grade education and wanted to be a boxer. And I got, look, he's awesome. Makes me so proud. So he started as an incident handler. His job was mostly going to sites, he learns how to do imaging tools. He learned how to do all these acquisition of images, so, NCASE and the FTK, Forensics Toolkit, and the real cool one was called Macquisition, because you can get it from a thumb drive without removing the media. And it's still respected in law because you're not using the operating system of the infected machine. The thumb drive is its own OS. Kind of cool tool. And then the forensics analyst's job is to look at that evidence, and hopefully it's a copy. Hopefully the incident handler was able to make a forensics image, a bit-by-bit copy. And you'll know, this isn't like doing a DOS copy. When you run a MD5 or SHA hash against the original, and then a hash against the image, they should come out the same. And DD has had that ability since at least like 2001, 2002. Yeah, it's a switch to do it. By default, DD didn't do that. I think even Ghost now has a switch to allow you to do that, but it's not the default. All the imaging tools I found from the big guys are free. They don't mind that you download the imaging tools. To buy the analysis software, guidance in case is by far the most expensive, I believe. Access data is up there. iLook, something police do. All right, so again, the forensics analyst's job is to determine what does this prove or disprove. All right, so I have to identify an incident. You better know what your network normally looks like. I love the FTK, yeah, the Access Data Forensics Toolkit. Profiling network behavior, you better know what it looks like normally if you're going to profile anything out of normal. And I told you, most people don't know what their network looks like in my experience. You got to sniff. You got to take a look. What does respect mean? It's one of my favorite words. Come from the Greek, via the Latin. Re means to do again. Spect, from the Latin, I believe, is spacere, and from the Greek, it is episkopos, and it means to see. If I look at you once and made up an opinion and don't look at you again, that is not respectful. A respectful person understands that every time I meet a person, they're different. The only thing you can ever count on about another person is that they will change. They will never be the same. So if you're respectful, you always give them a second look. If you respect your network, you will not just look at your network quarterly. You will continue to look at it. You monitor. Monitoring is respect. Now you're going to use logs to prove evidence, and these logs don't line up on clocks. Are you sure it happened first in the Chicago office and then spread to New York? According to these clocks, I don't know how you could make that assumption. Could easily have started in New York. So it's very important you run the network time protocol. NTP, saying it, 1, 2, 3, it's running on UDP, NTP, 1, 2, 3. All right, sorry, but it does work. It's UDP, NTP, 1, 2, 3. And we do our triage. We have a diagnosis matrix. These how the various classes of machines will be treated under these classes of attacks. And I can't stand being on the phone with a guy and I'm trying, dude, no, you told me 5 minutes, it's been 10. Now, when are you going to forward me up to somebody else? We have to define escalation procedures. When do I know? Oh, thank you, sir. All right, in any crime, you take pictures. Take pictures and be careful. People saying they sometimes take too many. They go, who was that guy? What's he doing in the background? So typically in a computer thing, you take a picture of the computer. You take a picture, if say it's powered on with the attack or whatever, you take a picture of the screen. Now I'd like to get what's in RAM too. And if I had a tool like the FTK or Guidance in Case Enterprise, I could, they keep them in memory there, so I could possibly get what's in memory. It's if it was preloaded. Not easy though, and they're not 100%, but we try to, and it's a testable objective to know you try to get what's in memory, what's in RAM. And then you do your containment measures. Now again, maybe I just pulled a network cable. And that could have a phone home. Boss, we just did some analysis. We pull this network cable, it's going to delete itself. Ooh. What if we keep the network cable in then? We continue to attack the White House. Ooh, that's not good either. So you do your best. And then your shutdown procedures, though, if you decide you're going to power it down in this type of attack on this type of machine, you have to know how to do it. And doing start shutdown is going to start writing things to the machine. So typically it is pull the power cable from the back of the unit. So if it's on a UPS, it doesn't gracefully shut it down. If I pull it from the wall, the UPS would. So I'll pull from the back of the unit. If it's a laptop, I pull the battery. Right? You image it. You take, if you can. Now, my student there, Aaron, said he couldn't use Macquisition because he had an employee who was under suspicion. They didn't want him to know. So he had to go in while the guy was at lunch and image his system without him knowing. And he said, everybody knows if you try to open up a Mac or these iMacs, you're going to scratch it. So that's why they were able to use this Macquisition. But typically, it's most trusted when you can remove the media from the machine it's in, from the whatever compromised machine, and mount this into a forensically trusted imaging machine. They have write blockers. When you mount a drive in Microsoft, if I put a new drive in my system here, Microsoft's going to go, hey, a new drive, you could probably use a recycle bin. We don't want that happening. So we try to get the forensics image. We label the evidence, and you're not going to remember what you did. You write down step by step by step what you did, and that includes, most importantly, any mistake you made. Because if you make a mistake and they just discover it there, can you explain to us why this hard drive has a file with a date of a time when it was in your possession? And you go, oh yeah, I just remembered when I first got the drive, I forgot to use the write block cable. You just remembered that now. Is there anything else you may have forgotten? But if you say, can I see my notebook? At 9:22, I acquired the image. At 9:35, I realized I had written the extra file. At 9:40, I rehashed the drive. And I removed the cable, and then I proceeded. And that, mistakes are mistakes. People don't like to see mistakes, but it looks better. It is part of business continuity. Our primary goal: minimize impact, not try to get bad guys. We run forensics tools on trusted forensics machines most of the time, because there's a question that you might bump into, and are we wrong that you run the forensic software on the hack machine to gather the evidence? No, you don't. No, you don't want to do that, because that operating system is compromised. Be prepared to get a call or have to call other agencies. Now, the big telcos, the big, Microsoft's not likely to call me, but I may get a call or have to call other affected parties, other incident response teams. Good hackers don't use their IP address. You got to let people know either it is the hacker, but more likely it's a zombie who's been infected. Law enforcement, incident reporting organizations, US CERT, FedCERT, Carnegie Mellon, the media, and your ISP, and always have a public relations department with a prepared statement. Again, you're Microsoft, you got offices around the world in hundreds of different languages. You do not want to have inconsistent press statements. What's admissible in court? Why, evidence must be material, competent, and relevant. And I looked up material, and it said C, relevant. Material seems to be in the discovery phase. Can I bring this? Relevancy is argued at trial, and competency be argued all the way. Now, my policemen who do this for a living tell me the hardest job is called the triple A's. You acquire, you authenticate, and you analyze. But on CISSP tests, I understand they want the words collection instead of acquisition, and identification instead of authentication. You analyze, store, preserve, transport, present it in court, and then maybe, depending on the outcome of the case, depending on the type of evidence, it might be returned to the owner. That's the old. Any further questions? Yes, may I have my glove back? Oh, sorry. What do you think? Reasonable doubt? Unreasonable doubt? Guy gets a speeding ticket. Lawyer argues, wait a minute, you from a camera? A camera that used MD5? Why, you can't trust that. Why, China's cracked that. This was only a year after it happened. And they tossed out the case and ordered the government to pay his bill. Now, I find that very unreasonable, but I'm glad, because I can't stand these camera companies because it's a major conflict of interest. This would never hold up in CISSP rules. They are financially incented to catch people. They put these in for free and they get paid, and they've been caught doing stuff like tweaking yellow light timers and having it. You guys in San Diego, you may remember that. That happened in San Diego. So I don't think it's fair. Our evidence will either prove that Bob did or did not do it. To inculpate somebody is to prove that they did. So the prosecution looks at the evidence as inculpatory. But the defense wants to prove that Bob didn't do it. They're looking to exculpate him. Best evidence refers to originals. Secondary evidence refers to, that's not original Webster's Dictionary. I'm just telling you, Webster's Dictionary says, according to their website, there was an article in Time magazine by. Direct evidence is something from a witness's senses. You cannot trust that. I saw it, Your Honor. How many fingers am I holding up? 4? All right, no further questions. People don't always know what they saw, or they could be lying. So remember, direct evidence needs backup. Real, physical, associative. This is something you can touch. Here's the gun. Here's fingerprint. Documentary evidence, we know to watch out for the hearsay rule, but paper records. Opinion comes in 2 types. I'm not a doctor. So if I gave you, for example, I had my sister who passed. She hadn't seen a doctor in 3 years, and yet he was still prescribing ridiculous amounts of pharmaceutical drugs for her. And I find it unreasonable. I'm not a doctor. We get a doctor to say that would be an expert opinion. Barry Scheck gave expert testimony. Demonstrative evidence removes demons. No, demonstrate. It will demonstrate. So a reenactment, maybe there's an animation. Let me demonstrate this for you. Corroborative is any type of supportive evidence. It could be more best evidence, more secondary, more direct, more real. Just helps support that story. But conclusive evidence doesn't need to be corroborated. Conclusive evidence stands on its own, and typically today that's going to be video of the assailant, maybe at the convenience store where you clearly see his face. That's pretty darn conclusive. And circumstantial evidence, just unusual circumstances like a blood trail that went from the dead body all the way to the doorsteps of the accused. That's damning evidence. Many people misunderstand the importance of circumstantial evidence. It's actually very damning. People think, oh, you can't get that. Most lawyers would much rather have circumstantial evidence than direct. In fact, Barry Peterson, the guy who got caught killing his wife many years ago, was convicted, and he was convicted on purely circumstantial evidence. Unusual circumstances like he was fishing right where his wife's body was found. That alone seemed very unusual. I had people debate on what best evidence really means, so I got this document from the U.S. courts. To prove the content of a writing, recording, or photograph, the original is required, except we have admissibility of duplicates. Well, like my birth certificate, long gone. The original's gone. But we have validated duplicates that are allowed. So it depends. If you're going to monitor your internal employees, make sure you're not invading their privacy. You can't, like I said, go over their HIPAA records. You can't put cameras in the dressing room, in the locker rooms. So be careful. Now, the Fourth Amendment applies to law enforcement. The only way law enforcement in the United States is allowed to get evidence is either a subpoena that says, give us the evidence, a warrant that says, get out of the way, we're coming in, or voluntary consent, you say, here, take it. But it could require immediate action. If someone kidnaps a baby, runs into my house and locks the door, that baby's life is at stake. The police have the right to kick in that door. If it's in plain view, right, that someone pulls you over for speeding and you've got machine guns sitting there. Imminent destruction of evidence for shredding records. Or, again, life safety requires immediate action. Exigent means it requires immediate action. We said enticement, legal, ethical. It's when somebody intended to commit a crime. Entrapment, neither. All right. If you are going to interrogate internal suspects, you always make sure the interviewer is senior. You don't want Bob the janitor interrogating Steve the senior VP. Come on, Schmitty, where was you Thursday? Call for you. You want your questions prepared and checked by legal and HR to make sure you're not asking illegal questions. One person's in charge. You need one or two other people there to validate their claim. Done in a private place, and if you are going to show exhibits, one at a time, because people will say some very stupid things when they don't know how much you know. Bob, can you explain to us why, you give me a little paper, why you went to this website July 22nd? Oh, my friend sent me an email. I just clicked on the link. I'm very sorry, sir. Thank you, Bob. Now, Bob, can you explain to us why you then went back that weekend to that website, only logged in from the Exchange server as the Exchange service account? We have cameras up there, you know. Oh. Anybody with kids know that people will say stupid stuff when they do. Where were you yesterday? After school, why were you so late? Oh, I went to Nadine's house. Okay, that's good. Did you know Nadine's mother called here looking for where Nadine was? Oh. All right, now, just real quick here. We don't need to know any of this stuff for a test. I just want. Robert Morris was a famous case of negligence. He just wanted to see how big the internet was, he claimed. Kevin Mitnick was trespassing. He never really tried to make any money. He stole all kinds of stuff, but he never tried to sell it. Paris Hilton's address book was one of my favorites, though. It wasn't just Paris Hilton's, but that's how they came out in the press. That was all of T-Mobile. I had T-Mobile's incident manager in my class, and he said, oh, dude, they had access to everything. Nicholas Jacobson, who did that hack, hacked into the police. Well, Secret Service were trying to track him down. Secret Service were using T-Mobile for their mail. So he was watching them track him. When they caught him, the rumor is they said, you got the choice. You can work with us or you can go to jail. And I just picture him going, well, it depends. You guys do Casual Friday? But I believe he took the job. Sony thought it'd be a good idea to put a kernel-level rootkit in audio CDs. That's lovely. Stuxnet, I'm sure you guys have heard of it. That's Cyber War, and Zeus is robbing banks. That's it, guys. I really, really can't thank you enough for helping me go through these things. I never want to charge somebody for something when I'm just going through it myself. But it seems like you guys enjoyed it too. So just thank you very much. And please stay in touch and let me know if you need anything. Yes, I will set you. It should be the same link. The mic. Oh, sure. Hold on. We'll put the mic on for our guys here. Where's my attendee list? Hey, unmute all there. There you go. What's up, Marco?
Oh, I just wanted to have a chance to thank you for your time this week. That was great.
It was so fun. I hope the rest of the appreciate all you guys appreciate
documentation.
Because I'm bantering back and forth with you, and it's so true, Marco. My class is so based on many of the
everything that is opening in on this show right here. I need to make it.
Take care, Phil.
Hi.
Hello. Who is that?
Hi. This is Rainey.
Hello, Rainey. Thank you very much for hanging in here.
It was good. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's only one. Well, it's every lab was only one.
Take care, Benza.
All right, Larry, thank you very much for all your time and efforts.
You're very welcome. Thank you, guys. Wasn't a waste of your week, right?
Um,
All right.
No, not at all.
Awesome.
It was great. Appreciate it.
it looks like they're wrapping up here, right? Oh, thanks.
Hey, I also do Wireshark classes and CISM and CRISC, so you need me to come out, I travel. Let me know.